on some other business, so we need to excuse them. I've asked Councilman Ivy to give us our opening prayer, after which Councilwoman Granger has been asked to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for the opportunity we have tonight to meet as citizens of the city of Washington. Father, we're thankful for the many blessings that we enjoy, where we live, and the blessings that we have by living. We appreciate the citizens that live here, and we pray, Father, for their happiness and success, as well as the employees of the city, and for all those that are concerned. We ask them to pray to bless them in their lives, that they may have success. Father, we're thankful for all the other many blessings that we enjoy. We pray for those leaders of the country, President Trump, and all those that make decisions that will benefit us as a country and as a people as a whole. Father, we're thankful again for our blessings. We pray for this with us tonight and help us to make those decisions that please thee and that would be best for our city. We say these things in Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Please stand and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilman Ivy and Councilwoman Granger, for your participation there. We want to welcome those of you that have joined with us, members of our community and others. Welcome to our meeting this evening. I'll look for a motion to approve our agenda.
Move approval.
Motion for approval by Councilwoman Granger.
Second.
Second by Councilman Belliston.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ellison, aye.
Nice and aye.
Turek, aye. Item number 2, announcements. Any announcements from anyone to be made? And happy one for all of you. Also, as one of our announcements this evening, we have a new video of our what we're made of that we do monthly out of our community. And so we've got our what we're made of Citizen of the Month that we'll share with you now.
Is he here?
Washington City is only as great as those who reside here, who make it great. And this is what we are made of.
My name is Rex V. as in Victor Torgensen. I've lived here for 30 years, last June the 23rd. That's when I moved here.
Why Washington, Utah?
Well, the house that was lived there, my son owned it. So I bought the house from him, real expensive house. It cost me $60. I enjoy it here. The people around in the neighborhood is very nice. Some are Mormons and some are not. I don't care what religion they are, as long as they respect the neighborhood. That's my feeling.
Why did you decide to donate a flag to Washington City?
I walked in there one day and that flag was torn. And so I said, you've got to get a flag. So I went home and got a flag and brought it and give it to them. I give a flag to the fire department across the freeway. I give them one all the time. But if any of the flags get tore or dirty, all they got to do is bring them to me. I will wash them and repair them. You could get a lot more use out of them.
Maybe tell me a little bit about that hat you're wearing right there.
The hat?
Yeah.
My older brother was in World War II. I was in Korea. My little brother was in Vietnam. When my brother got back, I was going to have to go into service, and he said, I'm not going in on my type of service where I'm on my feet and meet the people that's going to be shooting at me. So I enlisted, and it took 4 years. I spent 37 months in Korea and Japan. I was on a ship. We hauled ammunition to other ships, and to the guys on the ground that were doing the fighting. It just made me feel good because I didn't have to get out there and do any shooting. That flag means a lot to me, and that flag represents our country, and I would definitely go fight if I had to, because I love the country. I turned 86 November the 3rd. I've had quadruple bypass in my heart. I've had 16 stents put in. I went to the doctor yesterday and he said, "You're doing very good." So I don't have any problem. And I don't worry about it. Well, if I pass away, I'll pass away. I'm not going to sit there and fight it, but I'm not going to, because I want to live as long as my grandmother lived, 94. And I want to live that long. The whole thing about it is I love this town.
Washington City is only as great as those who reside here, who make it great. And this is what we are made of.
Is Rex here with us tonight? Stand up, Rex. You can see the great people that make our community, and that's why we have a great community. So it's certainly a great reward as we get to meet some of those folks as the city puts those together. So we appreciate those behind the scenes that produce those as well. All right, item number 3, declaration of abstentions or conflicts. Any to declare this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, our consent agenda. And the consent agenda is approval of the minutes from council meetings 11/21/2017 and 11/29/2017, and also our board audit report for the month of November. And whoops, we'll go on down and catch those alcohol licenses as part of the consent agenda too. We also have some renewal of alcohol licenses for the renewal of an off-premise license for Albertsons, the service station, and Walmart, and renewal of on-premises licenses for Coral Cafe and Entertainment, and also for the renewal of an on-premise recreation license for the Green Springs Golf Course.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Motion for approval from Councilman Belliston,
I'll second that.
seconded by Councilman Ivy.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Bellis and I.
Nice and I.
Turek, aye. Item 5, finance. Presentation of our 2016-2017 fiscal year audit by Hinton, Burdick, Hall, and Spilker. This is always that fun time that we get to see how good we were for the year and spotlight our finance department. So hopefully we'll shine.
All right. Yes, I'm Dave Whitwer with Hinton Burdick, and we're the auditors of the city, the financial statement auditors. And so here tonight I'm to go over the audit presentation for the year ended June 30, 2017. So I believe you have a copy of the audited financial statements. We won't refer a lot to that. I'll mainly, as shown on the outline here, I'll briefly go over our audit reports and any findings, and then we'll spend the majority of the time going over selected financial data, some graphs focusing on the major funds. If you have questions throughout, please let me know. All right, so our audit reports. First of all, there's a separate 3-page letter, a governance letter, that includes our standard required communications to the city council. All of that is pretty standard, nothing of significance to note, to point out there. Page 1 of the audited financial statements is our main audit report, and we've issued an unmodified or a clean opinion, so no issues there. And then towards the back, two other reports. Our report on compliance and internal control over financial reporting. As part of the audit process, we're required to gain an understanding of the city's internal controls. And as noted there are no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. So that's a positive. And then page 79 is our report on state compliance. The state auditor's office puts out an audit guide that we're required to look at certain compliance areas as part of the audit. And we've issued an unmodified or a clean opinion there as well. So no instances of non-compliance. And I do want to point out that there are no findings issued for fiscal year 17. So that's a great accomplishment for the city. We've issued a number of findings over the years, and management and accounting personnel have taken our findings and recommendations seriously and have made improvements. And we just
Excuse me, are findings discrepancies?
Yeah, as we do the audit, if there's weaknesses in internal controls that we see, or issues with non-compliance with state compliance, then those would be findings. So yeah, no findings this year. So we want to commend management and accounting personnel for their efforts. So keep up the good work. I do want to, before we move to the graphs, I want to point out the city did 2 bond refundings in fiscal year 17. But significant impact on the city's finances, significant savings. So the first one has to do with the city's water fund. A bond refunding is essentially a refinancing, take advantage of a lower interest rates. You issue new bonds to pay off old bonds. And the water revenue refunding bonds resulted in a reduction of future debt service payments of over 2.3 million, resulting in a net present value savings of over 1.7 million. And then the other one, the Coral Canyon Special Service District general obligation refunding bonds, they resulted in a reduction of future debt service payments of over 1.3 million, and resulting in a net present value savings of over 900,000. So that's another positive for the city. Great savings there with those lower interest rates and those bond refundings. All right, so these the financial information that we'll look at now comes from the audited financial statements. We'll look at some 5-year trends on some of the city's funds. So first of all, look at the city's general fund. This is the balance sheet. So you've got assets, liabilities, and equity here, fund balance. So that pink line is liabilities. That stayed fairly consistent. The bottom line is fund balance or equity. So equity is your assets less your liabilities. And that is nearly 2.5 million. So an overall increase in fiscal year 17 of 1.1 million. And nearly all of that 2.5 million in equity is unassigned. So the city can decide how to use that fund balance. You can see there fiscal year 15 was kind of the low point after combining the golf course, and now it's trending back up toward the more sound fund balance there.
That fund balance, what percentage of our budget is that?
Yeah, just about 14.
Just under 15, about 14%.
A little over 14%.
And we're allowed 15, is that right?
25.
25, yep. So here's,
We're allowed 25, but we've set this council at 15 as a target number.
As at least a minimum.
Or a minimum number, okay.
yep, good question. So yeah, if we look at this graph, this shows the revenues and expenditures for the general fund. You can see expenditures just under 14 million. That doesn't include transfers out. With transfers out, it's just over 14 million. Sorry, over 15, about 15.5 million. So, but touching on this one, revenues and expenditures for the general fund. So you can see there over a $2 million net increase before transfers. So revenues are greater than expenditures for the year. and approximately 1.1 million increase after transfers. The city budgeted for an increase of just under 400,000. Revenues are up about 1.4 million in the general fund. Most revenues are up, but the major increases are in sales tax, Class C road funds, community center charges, and recycling user fees. Expenses and transfers out are up about 1.1 million or 7%. As we see on this next graph, this shows the expenditures for the year for fiscal year 17 and 16, and it's by program or function. So you can see, pointing out some of the more significant changes. Sanitation was up significantly due to the new recycling service fee that started during fiscal year 16. So fiscal year 17 was the first full year under that. Community and economic development is up significantly. That's mainly due to personnel expenses. And then transfers out, you can see there that bottom liner is up about 500,000, and that's mainly due to an increase in transfers to the Streets Capital Projects Fund. Just quickly, we'll take a look at some of the trends in the more significant general fund revenue sources, sales tax and property taxes. So this first one here, sales tax revenue for the last 5 years, you can see significant increase the past 5 years. If you combine all 5 years, it's about a 40% increase for those 5 years. Fiscal year 17, the increase in sales tax was about 8.6%.
And what percent of our total budget is that? Sales tax.
Good question. So total revenues is, you can see that top line there, about 16.6 million. So of that, 5.5 is sales tax. And you can see about 3.4 is property tax revenues. I believe this does include Coral Canyon Special Service District property taxes as well. Property taxes are up over the 5 years about 27%. Increase for fiscal year 17 was about 5.4%. This shows the annual percentage change each year in those two revenues. The pink line is the pink bars are the sales tax. The blue is property tax. You can see the 8.6% increase for sales tax and 5.4% in property tax for 17. Okay, any other questions on general fund before we move to the proprietary funds?
No, maybe just a quick statement of people that are watching that's not due to any actual tax increase. That's just due to growth of
Right.
those lines.
Yeah, that's growth. Exactly. Good point. Okay, so we'll now look at some of the major proprietary funds. We'll start with the water fund.
Maybe also statement that we've had some concern, or at least watching closely, the percentage of sales versus property tax we have. We'd like it to be a little higher on the property, a little lower, well, not lower on sales ever, I suppose, but some balance there.
Balance. Okay, so this first graph shows the operating revenues and expenses for the water fund. So this doesn't include non-operating activities such as gain on sale of assets or impact fees, interest earnings, so forth. So this is just operating revenues. You see the revenues are the blue line, that top line, the pink line are expenses. So for fiscal year 17, there was about 112,000 net operating income. That's pretty consistent with the prior year margin. Both revenues and expenses are up. And if we look at, for the water fund, this shows as of June 30, 2017, the water fund's cash and investments, as well as unrestricted equity. So the pink line is the equity, Unrestricted equity, approximately 5 million. So that increased by about 800,000 or 19% for fiscal year 17. And that represents, that 5 million represents, if you compare that to water fund expenditures, that's about 94% of current year operating expenses. And the blue line, the cash investment, that's up about 13%. Moving to the sewer fund. So for fiscal year 13 through 15, their operating margins decreased from the peak in fiscal year 12. And then that trend continued with 16 and 17 to where operating expenses are actually greater than revenues. So there's a net operating loss for fiscal year 17 of about 250,000. Revenues are about the same. Expenses are up, mainly due to repairs and maintenance. If you include non-operating items in the sewer fund, there's actually a positive about $413,000 increase. Cash flow from operating activities is positive. So if we look at the equity as of the end of June for the sewer fund, very strong. You can see pink line unrestricted equity is over 5.7 million. That balance is about 3 times the fiscal year 17 operating expenses. Cash investments increased by about 1.1 million. Electric or power fund. So you can see both revenues and expenses are up significantly. Repairs and maintenance are up in expenses. The net operating income is about 586,000 for fiscal year 17. That's fairly consistent with the fiscal year 16. So these past 2 years, there's been improved gross margin. There have been rate increases in the power fund. So as of June 30, the pink line unrestricted equity of over 6.2 million. That's a slight increase, and that represents about 53% of current year operating expenses. And the cash and investments about the same, a slight decrease there. Storm drain. You can see the activity in the storm drain fund continues to increase there, both revenues and expenses. There's been significant net operating margins there. So if you look at the pink line unrestricted equity of about 2.3 million, that's pretty consistent with the previous year. And that represents about 2.5 times current year operating expenses. And cash and investments continue to increase. And then the funds of the city that we haven't talked about, here's just kind of a snapshot of total equity by fund. These are the rest of the funds of the city, the non-major funds, as well as the Coral Canyon Special Service District is bolded there. That's actually a major fund for fiscal year 16 because of the bond refunding that I mentioned earlier. I'll point out just a few here. So total equity, capital projects funds, recreation increased mainly due to impact fees and minimal expenses or capital outlay activity. Capital projects fund streets increased due to the increase in transfers. There is that new fund there, Special Revenue Fund, Washington City Foundation. That's a new fund for fiscal year 17. That's a blended component unit. And you can see the bottom there, irrigation, over 3 million. Essentially, that's all investment in capital assets. There's been significant capital contribution, non-cash contributions there to the irrigation fund. All right, so any questions? That's all I've prepared. I'll certainly want to thank the city for the opportunity to provide audit services, and we want to thank Kimberly Rouge and Brian Brown and all those that assisted with the audit. It's a lot of work, and we appreciate their efforts. So,
Any questions from council?
No, just wanted to say thank you, and I guess probably ask Kimberly, when is this available to the public?
It's available now. It's been uploaded to the finance page of the website.
Okay, thanks.
And do you do a separate management letter to management?
Yes,
Do we have access to that?
That, and as mentioned, this year there were no findings, and so we didn't issue that letter.
Okay.
So, but yeah, in years past, we've issued that letter with the findings, but this year where there are no findings, there's
Okay.
no.
I saw a reference to it in the material, but I didn't see the letter, so there was none.
Yeah. No.
Thank you.
That's a great thing when we don't have those
Yes, it
letters
is.
showing up. So
Yes.
congratulations to Kimberly and your Brian and those that in our city that make our finances such a great, you can see we're in great financial position
Yeah.
for our citizenry out there. It's good people. And
I
thank
know.
you guys for your services.
Roger mentioned how pleased we would be that that reserve starting to come up from where it's been, and we are pleased. We need to have that, so.
Correct. Yeah, we've seen how fast it can disappear. So.
Yeah, right.
Pretty high bar for next year.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Item 5B, consideration to approve the fleet management replacement model. Kimberly Roosh.
So I have a question on that. We have a public hearing on that on 10C.
So the public hearing is for the internal loan that will fund this year's rollout.
Okay.
So that will
All
come
right.
and then you'll have a resolution to approve the loan later. So kind of before we do the public hearing, we felt like we needed to have the council take formal action on the fleet model that we presented to you back in November.
Okay.
And so just as a kind of a quick overview of that, then we did present this fleet replacement model to the council back at the November workshop session. So what the model is it's a 10-year rolling plan to fund the replacement of fleet that's used by the general fund. So we're talking vehicles, automobiles. And we currently have about 59 vehicles, and they have an average life right now of just under 10 years, and with an average mileage of about 92,000. And so through this plan, our hopes are that we can have an ongoing plan to replace our vehicles so that we don't have a great need all at once to replace everything. And so this replacement plan would look at rolling out the patrol vehicles for police every 7 years or 105,000 miles, and the rest of the general fund fleet would roll out on a 10-year average or 150,000 miles. And so at the start of this, with the number of vehicles that we have over a 10-year cycle, we're looking at rolling out about 6 vehicles a year. And then in an effort to just be mindful of the costs and so forth of that, we had presented to the council about funding this internally. And that's a measure that allows us to save money as a city. So we'll save about 0.5% of interest rate costs that we would have paid out on the market. So out on the market right now, if we did a 5-year lease program, it would run us around 2.5% interest or thereabouts. And internally, we plan to pay a 2% interest rate, which is higher than the investment rate that our internal funds are being invested in right now. So our average investment rate that the treasurer's provided us with right now is that their earnings are about 1.7%. So by funding it internally, the fund that will do the loan will actually earn more in interest earnings as an investment than they would out on the market. And on the general fund side, we'll actually save on interest expense costs by doing that. And so we felt like it was a great option to the city to do this. And so again, each year we would come forward with an internal loan for the vehicles that would be funded for that year. And it's a 5-year finance plan, but the vehicles would, again, on average, we would retain in the fleet for 7 to 10 years.
As I recall, this will cost us about $9,000 in interest.
So we are paying interest. We would be paying, the general fund will pay the lease payments on the vehicles that will go to so the first year, our proposal is that the water fund be the one that internally funds it. So yes, there is an interest expense because whenever we do internal loans, we're required by the state legislature to actually have a formal payback plan, and the interest rate has to be at least equivalent to what we would expect for them to receive out in the market in terms of an investment.
But we
So-
have been buying only 2 vehicles. We have a large number,
Yes.
around 150,000. This allows us to replace 6 of those
6 a year
as
instead of 1 or
opposed to
2.
2. And
Right.
if we bought just 3, that 9,000 wouldn't go very far in
That's
that third
correct.
car.
Yes,
So,
that's correct.
So right now we have a fleet of about 60 vehicles.
We have
So
about
how-
60
how does it-
vehicles, and that's in just the general fund. So the enterprise funds have vehicles as well, but the rollout model, because the enterprise funds are in a better position to be able to finance their own replacement needs, whereas the general fund, it's a little harder for us. And so our goal is that we will have a dollar amount that we can look to fund each year in the budget to roll
So
these
what-
vehicles over.
What happens when we determine we need to add to that?
So when we have to add, I mean, we will still have to budget to add to the fleet. And once we have, like when we have, if we have new hires or things like that that require vehicles, we will have to continue to add to the fleet, and then they'll just drop in at the bottom of the 10-year cycle. So over the life, I mean, at some point we'll have to have more than 6 a year because our fleet will continue to grow.
and
So
it's
that's
not
basically where we're
necessarily
starting.
10 years either. It's based on what the fleet division tells
That's
us
correct.
are the number of
Yeah.
corrections and how well those vehicles are going. And if it can give
Mhm.
15 years, great, we'll give 15 years.
That's
But
correct. So
yeah.
all this does is it presents a guide for what we're looking at, but ultimately the fleet division will decide which of the vehicles. So if we had a vehicle that was less than 10 years, but again was causing us a high maintenance, maybe it was a year where there was a lot of maintenance needs that were happening for that vehicle year that had been manufactured, then the fleet division could choose to make a recommendation that a vehicle roll out sooner than that, or again, retain in the fleet longer than 10 years as well. So.
Any other questions or discussion from the council? So I'm assuming that we're going to need a action on this one.
Yes.
So with that being said, I'll look for a motion from council to go ahead and decide whether we want to put this model into place or not.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, I'll make a motion. We approve the fleet management replacement model as outlined by Kimberly Rouge.
I'll second that
Motion
motion.
for approval by Councilman Belliston and seconded by Councilwoman Granger.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Bellis and I.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. Thank you. We want to appreciate those within the city that looked at that. I think it's a great thing. Like you say, we make more money from those investments and save money on the other end. You can't beat a deal like that. So thank you there. We'll move on to item 6, agreements. Consideration to approve the first amended Washington County Mutual Aid Agreement, applicant Washington County Commission. Is this Chief Keith got this? Awesome.
Good evening, council. Thank you for this opportunity. This is simply a renewing of a agreement that's in place for a general mutual aid agreement, not anything specific. They've added a couple of other entities to it, and the notion that it can be renewed automatically at the end of the cycle. And so it's nothing new or different than what we had. It also by law with FEMA, in order to bill for a large scale emergency or something like that where we had other people involved, there had to be a specific piece in there about billing. So there's a piece in there for that, and a piece in there that allows the requesting agency to waive those fees from another agency as well, which is typically what we do. We share resources down here very well with other agencies. So any questions, I'll be glad to
So
answer.
just kind of the renewal process with the little language and a few things that need to be taken care of.
Yeah, this
housekeeping-wise.
one actually expires this month, and so it's time to renew it.
So
Is this just police services? Does this include firefighters in California?
It
That's a
doesn't.
long reach mutual aid.
Well, I think
Yeah,
we're
this
doing
doesn't
it, though.
include them going to California. It includes anything we would request in our county. It's countywide mutual aid agreement.
So what I've got in my packet is one from 2011. I don't have an updated one.
Yeah, you would. The actual one that's in here is dated originally as 2008, and it shows it expiring on December 31st, 2017.
Well, I'm reading, this one says 15 November 2011. So I don't know, maybe something's,
Yeah, it's probably not the correct one then that's in there.
Okay.
Is there concerns from the council
I don't have any
discussion wise as
concern
far
with
as
it, I
moving forward with that?
We can't
I think
approve
we
the wrong
wanna-
one.
Denise, the one in the packet was just was the current one, I think, right? We didn't have the packet, the amended one, or did we get the amendment put in it?
This is just the one that I've been given to.
Yeah,
from
and I don't think
Denise.
that's been shared
Okay.
with us. Is that
Okay.
correct? Yeah. Any concern from the council without seeing that? I mean, he's kind of told us what's within it, but
I can share with you specifically what it is if you'd like.
But like I said, I don't have any problem with it. It's just it's an amended. I'm looking
Right.
at the old one, so.
This has been amended specifically for funding. You said to
It's-
make that
it's-
billing clear.
It's amended to include the County Flood Control Authority, adding them to the list, and also the public safety, public safety emergency incidents of any kind. And so it's kind of an emergency management over very general agreement. Specifically, one of the things that it adds is the option to automatically renew rather than having to bring it back each time if all the participants agree. And then the piece that I told you in reference to funding for FEMA, by law, we are not eligible for any reimbursement from FEMA unless we have that billing clause in there. And so that was added. So that
And I think I saw something about if we chose not to renew, we could give, was it a 2-week notice? What was
you mean as far as the billing goes?
yes, I did.
Yeah, there's also a piece in there that allows us to waive charging any other agency that's part of this agreement. And without getting into too much detail, there's a first operation cycle, second operation cycle, and it can go as many cycles as needed depending on the emergency operation or the situation involved. And so that first operation is the one that it talks about. We can actually wait. If I called St. George City or another agency down here to assist us on a larger scale event, we could choose not to bill that city for our services, which is typically what we do. That doesn't have any impact on what we recover from FEMA, but it's an option for us to do that based on that piece. And then,
I wonder if legally we can approve something we don't have in front of us.
So Chief, this one says that this agreement is effective until December 31st, 2060.
2016?
2060.
6-0?
6-0.
It's a mutual agreement. The term of this mutual aid agreement shall be from the effective date hereof until December 31st, 2060, or until one of the parties terminates the agreement.
Yeah, and I believe
So-
you have the wrong one because I think the one you have specifically talks about SWAT, and that is not the one that we're dealing with tonight.
Do we,
Okay.
This is a
Is it
general.
a problem if we table it to the
think
next?
we better
the first
table it
meeting
and
in
get the right
January?
one?
No, I have no problem with that. It's not going to change anything.
I'd prefer to table it until I can read the
fine. Yeah.
agreement that we're.
Okay. And I don't know how that got in your packet.
And
differently
it
or
also
not,
says that the agreement would be automatically renewed for additional 50 years, just to
Yeah.
comment.
So that takes us to 2110.
Yeah, and that is absolutely not
Doesn't take me
even,
there.
I might be gone by then.
yeah, that's not part of it. That's one that's not been even approved by us yet to go forward, so.
Okay, well,
I'll go ahead and make the motion. We table this till the
Yeah.
first meeting in January and then.
And we'll have Denise get you the right one
second.
that she gave me, so, okay.
Thank you.
Maybe
Thank you.
just keep that line from the county, but just show it.
It's not the same one.
so we have a motion for a table. Councilman Belliston, second by Councilwoman Granger.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ellis and I.
Nice night.
Tarek, aye, and I'm assuming the date would be to our next meeting.
Yeah,
Date
first meeting in
specific
January.
to our
first
next
council
meeting in
yeah.
January. Thank you. All right, item 7, annexation. Consideration to accept and move forward with an annexation application for the Staley addition located approximately on the northwest corner of 3090 South and 240 West. Applicant, Washington County School District.
Good evening. We're going to try this.
I told Denise just to use sign language tonight. She's-
I wish I knew it better. This is just an application for a property that's located at 240 West and 3090 South on that northwest corner. It's owned by the Staleys and the Washington County School District. And so they're requesting that that portion come in. In your colored map, you'll see that the city boundaries touch on the north and the south side of this property. See right there, you can see where it's on the north and the south
This is
side.
part of that little island that's down there that we're going to clean a little piece up.
Right next to the new intermediate school.
Right. I've talked to the county and they're okay with us creating two smaller ones because we're in the process of cleaning the other part up. So there's no problem with the boundary commission on that. What we're looking for tonight is just acceptance of the application.
Starting the process.
If you're wanting to move forward, then we'll start the advertising, certification, and all that.
Okay. So basically, this begins the process. That's what we're looking to do. So without having Denise use any more of her voice,
Thank you.
Not much of that.
I'll look for a motion of annexation.
Mayor
procedures
Pro
moving
Tem,
forward.
I'd make that motion to accept and move forward with an annexation for the Staley addition located approximately on the corner of 3090 South and 240 West.
Second.
Motion for approval by Councilman Ivy, seconded by Councilman, Belliston.
Ivy, aye.
Too many names rolling around.
Granger, aye.
Bellis tonight.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. Thank you. Item 8, final plat. Consider and recommendation to City Council for the Casitas at Sienna Hills, Phase 4, located at approximately Casitas Hills Loop. Applicant Brennan Holdings, number 200 LLC.
Thank you. As stated, the applicant is requesting the final plat approval, Casitas at Sienna Hills Phase 4. This is the final stage of the Casitas and is proposing the final 24 lots, and the area coverage is 3.25 acres. The zoning at this particular subdivision is the PCD, Planned Community Development, so it's the Sienna Hills PCD. It also has with it the short-term rental availability on this particular, especially throughout this phase. Preliminary plat was approved back on March 12th, 2014. Staff reviewed the requested proposal and finds that the proposed final plat conforms to the approved preliminary plat. Planning Commission reviewed this final plat last week at their December 6th meeting. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the final plat for the Casitas at Sienna Hills Phase 4 onto you, the City Council, and that's based on, of course, the findings subject to the conditions. There are 6 conditions. The first 5 are standard for any final plat. Number 6 was that the section monument be referenced on the plat. That was actually emailed to me, so that's been taken care of already just this afternoon. So that's been updated, and one of our commissioners, who's an engineer, wanted to make sure that the monuments out there, there's one that's been either missing or was broken or something. He just wanted to make reference of where it came and that it's on the plat. So he's aware of that. And so he asked Bush and Gudgel to take care of that, and it's been updated. So everything else is ready to go, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that the council might have on Phase 4 of the
Any
Casitas.
questions from council on our final plat for Sienna Hills Phase 4? Discussion? If not, I'll look for a motion.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we well, I was looking for the right wording. Make a recommendation that we approve the Casitas at Sienna Hills Phase 4, located approximately Casitas Hills Loop.
Motion for approval.
I'll second that. Also.
Second by Councilman Ivy.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Bellis and I.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. Item 9, road dedication. Consideration to accept a road dedication plat for Washington Parkway. Public Works Director Mike Shaw.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council. This is a dedication that we've actually requested from SITLA to give us a road dedication for the Washington Parkway to be able to connect exit 13 with the upper Green Springs area. And it also includes the connection of Main Street to Washington Parkway. And this was done at no cost to the city. Sitla actually deeded the property over to us at no cost. So great having a partner like that that is willing to do something.
Absolutely.
I have a question. If this is the beginning of the northern corridor, should that ever occur, and the northern corridor would be a state road, is that right?
Possibly.
So
The state would have to accept it as a state road. And
wouldn't
I
they
think
have,
there's negotiations going on with that right now. Originally, they were not going to accept it as a state road.
so if it's a state road, they have to build it, right?
Not
Or
necessarily.
fund it. Yeah, usually they're involved
Yeah,
with.
not
generally,
necessarily. Sometimes they'll fund it. Sometimes they will do it if they get partnership. And we're not looking, we're actually looking at doing a partial build.
Well, I reckon say we tend to build when we have development in there, and the developers can pay for that. But it seems to me if that eventually leads in the northern corridor and that's a state road and the state builds it because it goes through the habitat, there isn't anybody else to build it, that they should build this portion for us.
Correct. So what's happened, and it's not, last Wednesday, I put a request into the MPO for some federal funding for this project. We were approved by the advisory committee to send that on to the executive committee, which they'll meet in February, but we were approved for a $2 million funding for this project. And what we're looking at is initially doing a 30-foot wide asphalt roadway so we can connect and possibly get some of that additional traffic off of the Green Springs interchange. It won't be a major help, but it will help move some of the traffic, getting them from the upper Green Springs area out to the interstate, especially for people that will be heading north.
Yeah. Any, right?
Our initial was about 1% to 2% reduction, but as we grow up in that area, it could be quite a lot more.
Substantial over time.
So we've got on Main Street an 85-foot right of way with, it's showing 28-foot landscape easement on either side of that, or as part of that.
Well, that would be in addition above it. So the Brio development is actually putting in, they've actually, if you've been up there recently, they built quite a large section already, their half, and they'll be doing the landscaping on their side of the road.
But the landscape easement is basically is being granted that's not part of this right away.
Right, correct. Then along with this funding, my thoughts are that we have $2.4 million of federal funds allocated for Merrill Road. I'd like to move that $2.4 million towards this project and fund Merrill Road with local funds. That way we're not federalizing two projects and having to go through the cost of a federal project on two. So it's pretty much maximizing our dollar towards one project.
This is probably another long discussion with the council again sometime, but if we don't build this road, there's no northern corridor.
Possibly.
Okay. And since that's probably an inevitability sometime, it ought to give us some leverage about where that northern corridor goes, because there isn't one without our cooperation. I know you're on the MPO, Councilman
Yeah.
Turek, and I know that they've just pulled that corridor drawing in closer to those homes that we have there.
No, actually, it pulled, well, on the back side of the ridge, it pulled in. Actually, the corridor right now is being built as we approve those developments. They're being built up there. The Washington Parkway goes in, and where it meets the habitat boundary, it goes up and over that ridge. And originally, the original proposed was to kind of go on across and tie in. Now they've looked at coming down the backside of that ridge and coming
pushing
down
south.
Yeah, pushing south, exactly. That you've got a copy of. So it pushes south and comes down closer to above Middleton, across those ledges, trying to stay as much out of the habitat as they can. And so it really doesn't affect any of our, it doesn't pull any closer to any of our homes in our community. It certainly does St. George in the Middleton area because it comes down on top of that ridge directly above those.
Once it becomes a northern corridor as opposed to just the parkway, which is servicing that area, then it becomes 30 to 40,000 cars a whatever hour or something like that.
A day.
Then the part of our parkway that they want to use as a corridor is going to be hugely impacted, and that goes right through those homes.
Correct.
And
Well, and I think that was the anticipation of we have talked with the MPO about pushing the corridor up over the top and entering the habitat to the north side.
yeah, if they do it right here and get
Yeah,
up above
yeah,
those
that,
homes
they
rather
were,
than go
they were
right through
approached
those
with
homes,
that.
I'm
And
sure
and
they're
of course, the
opposed.
habitat said, we don't want you in the habitat anymore than you already are asking for.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of frowned upon basically by the MPO board members to look at that and say, and then we had that we would have an intersection with the portion that we had built, which wasn't really wanted either.
I know. So I just spent an hour on the phone with Dean Cox today trying to, but I mean, our leverage is this road. I think.
Well, it may be leverage to them, but it also is our citizenry that we hold hostage.
Well,
That's I mean, we may leverage the county, but at the same token, at what detriment do we to our citizenry that's trying to get in and out of an intersection up there?
One way or another, this access has to go through to open up all that ground on the east side of the Green Springs area. So in the fact that we're being, I guess, given the access to free those areas up.
yeah, well, it's only
Regardless.
this portion that matters. I mean, their access will be into here. It's where it comes
Yeah,
over here.
ultimately, what we're talking tonight is not going to impact anything other than you're saying if that becomes the corridor, we want to hold this portion of our corridor hostage to saying, well, we'll go ahead and put this in as long as you'll change the top.
Well,
Isn't that what you're asking?
I'm just saying it should be part of the discussion because it's to their advantage to have us cooperate and it's to our advantage to have them cooperate because all of this has still got to get through the BLM and I recognize it's a long discussion. I'm
Yeah,
hoping, Mayor Pro Tem, that we could put on the agenda maybe a little further discussion for us down the road.
Yeah, we certainly can do that. Yeah, we'll have that discussion because I'll share with you what I've argued with the MPO.
Because I know you've been working on
Correct.
it too. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and regardless of the northern corridor extending through, this has been part of our master plan for over 15 years. And this is a need that we need just for our residents and the development of that area. And that's why we push forward with
I
this.
understand that.
If there is no other discussion.
Any other discussion there? Look for a motion then.
I'd go ahead and make a motion to accept a road dedication plat for the Washington Parkway.
Motion for acceptance by Councilman Ivy, seconded by Councilman Belliston.
Ivy, aye.
That's Granger, aye.
Bellis and I.
Turek, I will note that Councilman Nyson has stepped out to the restroom for a moment, so he was not here for that vote. Item 10, our public hearings. Before we move on, we certainly, Mike, will you let Sitla know of our gratitude and appreciation? As Mike mentioned, that came at no cost to the city, which is
Amazing.
usually never, I mean, that's probably $5 million right there. That was just donated to us, so thank you for them. Public hearings, item 10. Public hearing for consideration to approve an ordinance amending the city code, Title 9 zoning regulations, Chapter 8 residential zone, Article F, planned unit development residential, and amending Chapter 10 by adding Article E, planned unit developments, commercial/industrial. Applicant, Washington City. That ought to confuse everybody by what we're talking about, but ultimately, in a nutshell, what we're looking at is amending our PUDs to include commercial and industrial PUDs.
I guess that's it. We could go through this page by page, but there's 27 of them, and I don't know if we want to leave at 12 or 1 o'clock. We can choose that, but basically, the Planning Commission and City Council have been working this over for almost 10 months, I would say, since this process started to get this. I was supposed to have it completed. Actually, I got the assignment over a year ago to redo the PUDs, and then through the process, we ended up breaking it up into 5 PUD options, and there's 3 residential, 2 commercial. And so with those, what ended up is the forefront didn't change too much. We did take out for those developers out there so wishing, the 20-foot band around the homes is no longer viable. We've just done what almost every community does. It's a 50-50 type of a relationship. There should be no more than 50% used by buildings, and there will always be 50% non-buildings throughout the project. That's pretty standard for a lot of cities and their PUD. What we have done is created 3 residential, and I'm just going to scroll down to those. And the first one is the well, I think I just went past it. Let me go back a little bit. The first PUD is going to be the residential single lot development standard. So that means if somebody wants to go into a PUD, but then they have a regular subdivision with individual lots and the homes on those lots, they can do that. And here's the standards that are above and beyond the standards for all PUDs. That's what the end of that V is up there. It just shows all the stuff they would have to apply for in their packets and the information they provide. Basically, what we allow for is, again, building coverage is 50-50 on that. The minimum lot sizes are 5,000 square foot. Again, our regular lots, the smallest in the city, is a 6,000 square foot lot. So PUDs are always what we call kind of like customized, or no, I just lost my train of thought on that, but it's zoning that's specific, that's negotiable is what it is. And it's a zone for negotiating out zoning. The minimum lot size would be 5,000. And again, that's provided they have 20% of the project is developed and maintained in common landscape or recreation area. So now we do allow for density increases in the PUD. That was one of the things that the Planning Commission City Council wanted to see. So item number 2 it talks about that. So to be able to apply and ask for higher densities, you have to hit, you have your options to try to work with item A, B, or C in here. And it basically means that you're going to dedicate more open space, and then we'll give you higher densities, but it means the densities will be closer together.
As we do that, what densities are we referring?
What's referred to in the general plan. Yeah. So it kind of talks about that in there, that if my normal density was, say, 6 dwelling units per acre, if I proposed, a landscaping along the periphery of the development, letter A, or tree-lined streets, or landscape open spaces, or a mixture of each of those, then I could come back and say, I'd like to have higher density. But as you read it, you'll only be able to go up like 25%, at the highest that we would allow that.
But so as we on the general plan indicate proposed zonings.
Whatever this is, if this is in a low density, say, designated area, and they want to do a PUD, they fall between that 4 and, well, it's actually 3.5 and 4.5 dwelling units per acre.
So in the general plan, will we indicate that as a low density PUD?
Well, they can come and apply for that general plan if they want to. Again, we offered that PUD zoning, general plan designation. So in case they're really not ready, they can come and get a little bit of warmth, and a little bit of assurance that the city would then really strongly look positive at their PUD. Or they can just come, they don't have to go to the general plan and zone it that way or designate it. They can still propose a PUD in any zone. It's just that we offered that in the general plan as one of the alternatives. Especially if it's long range planning for them, they wanted to designate that area, plan unit development, we would let them apply for that in the general plan, and then come back, say, a year or 2 or 3 years down the road and say, here's what our PUD, here, now we're going to finally apply for your zoning. There's still the 2 options available, if that makes sense to you.
I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to have 2 weeks to study this, aren't I?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to have a couple of weeks to continue to study this, actually.
Yeah, normally it didn't fall under our parameters that we normally do that, but we just felt, yeah, we're going to do that on this anyway.
Yeah, I think what I'm asking is, what are the implications of these new zoning on the general plan? How does it look on the general plan?
And I can discuss that to you.
Probably
tomorrow.
Won't change anything right off the bat as far as that goes, because general plan still is medium density, low density. And so you can come into a low density and propose a PUD, but it would fall within the low density zoning process of that. So you would know your units per acre in that.
Yes. And so what's stated, I'm just going to use the number 10 because it's so easy. If it said my densities were, 10 dwelling units per acre, well, according to this, if I wanted to propose to the city that I'm going to offer you some extra open space, things like this, that I could get up to 12.5 dwelling units per
Yeah,
acre.
you've
Because
tied
if,
you've tied it to the bonus density. It's-
Correct.
in essence, that's what it is.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah. But it can still go in any zone. You know, we do have the designation in general plan. If somebody wants to do that, they don't have to go to the general plan and get it designated PUD, then come back. That's just, we offered that for people who wanted to get something designated that were still maybe down the road a little ways. So, because this is going to happen within a shorter amount of time, the zoning is. So anyway, that's kind of the gist in the single family lots. Then we had a residential multifamily development standard. Again, this is for your townhomes, your apartments, whatever you wanted to do. That's going to basically be, you're going to own the footprint, but then all the rest of the ground is going to be common area. And again, we went and the densities fall within. Again, most of these are going to happen if I have a medium high density general plan designated property. I'll probably be looking at doing a PUD multifamily in there. And again, we offered still the same thing on the densities. You're going to come and give us a proposal saying we'd like a little bit more, but here's what we're going to give the city in turn.
So we talked before about setbacks, and this is the section that has that additional verbiage in the setbacks that says, and the setbacks will be these unless an approved setback alternative plan is granted by the Planning Commission and City Council. Can we add that verbiage to the other sections as well?
We could, if that's the council's decision, they want to put this same reference. And I'm glad Councilman Belson brought that out. If you go back to the single family, the setbacks are pretty much, let's just go to them real quick. So then you'll know what I'm talking about.
They're interestingly enough, 5 feet on one side and 10 on the other, and 15 feet apart from the resident next to it. It's kind of lopsided, isn't it? Why is it 5 on one foot side and 10 on the other side?
Sometimes they do that. Other cities will have, you can have an aggregate of 15, so you can do 8 and 7.
Okay.
Sometimes they just like to shift them over, and
if you need to shift the house one way because of,
one side just a fence. Yeah.
some like to, and some like to have access to the backyard area. So if I had them at say 5 and 5 and people max that out, then, we're kind of kicking that out as an option for people to have access back. So this kind of almost puts in place that they will have an access back. That's just one of the examples. When it's all said and done, you're driving down the street, you can't see the property line. We know they're there, but it looks like as if it was all maybe 7.5 feet between the homes, but it's really shifted from 5 and 10, but you always have to have 15 feet in between.
Why do we care if it's 5 and 10? Why don't we just care if it's 15 from the next home? Let them shift in that however they want to.
Well, what helps is that in this is where the building code kicks into play.
Because then your neighbor's dictating your setback.
Because if I go at 1 foot, then you're going to have to be at 14 feet over there. But the worst case scenario is you're 10.
Yeah, there's safeguards.
Okay.
So, plus the other safeguard in that is that the building codes at the 5 foot mark, things start changing. You have to have more protection on the exterior wall if you're less than 5 feet. So this just keeps it where nobody has to worry about if it has to be a 2-hour wall. We know that they can do whatever kind of exterior, the number of openings. This just keeps it easier to not have to worry about that.
So we discussed that there's other areas in the city that have tighter or have different setbacks. And we drove a project and they have different setbacks. So that's why I wanted that verbiage in there, so that if somebody comes in with a project that makes sense and for whatever reason, that we have that flexibility to adjust it.
And they show you that they're really concerned about that, and they're showing that the development's going to be an overall, like a mini PCD is the way I like to refer to it. Because in our PCDs, our bigger 200 acre plus projects, we let them kind of come in and throw what setbacks they want to promote, in their entire development. And a lot of them, they change and vary between the commercial and the higher density and the lower density. They're really good about that. A PUD is like a small version of a PCD. It just doesn't have all the components. But this allows them that.
It's not without precedent within Washington City already.
Correct.
So, okay.
Correct. So that is one of the things that Council Belson talked to me about, is maybe allowing for, again, this goes back to the single family lots. You can see it's a standard 20-foot front, 20-foot on corners, and then it gets, we did give them some variation on the side setbacks. We don't, in normal zoning, we don't have this 5 and 10. but it's kind of standard in a PUD. Councilman Bellison wants to go and incorporate what he was talking about was the setbacks as we get to the multifamily. You can see the verbiage changes, and they are allowed to come and give you a proposal that, hey, we would like to have these setbacks, but here's what we're going to do, in our development that's going to make you feel better about giving us those closer setbacks. And then they'll give you their song and dance, and then you either accept it and like it, or you counter offer with them or whatever. But this allows that option to take place, which is a good thing.
Under multifamily development standards, there's a reference that the proposed dwellings are platted for individual ownership of the dwelling units in regards to the density. What does it matter if we have individual ownership, or somebody wanted to put a project together where
they were going to own them all? Yeah, they become basically all rentals or apartments is what they do. Even they could do that in a townhome project. In fact, there's people who have done that. That's the retirement package, and they're going to own it all, and there's all rentals. Then there's no subdividing involved.
But yeah, but
we can tweak
the
that.
Density argument kicks it out and says it's individual. I mean, I don't understand why that reference is in there.
I guess because most of them, we can go back and look at that, in the next couple of weeks. So just earmark that one for me, and we'll try to see if there's something that would open that up, that would at least allow, because it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen that someone may come in and want to build 12 units. I'm going to own them all. I'm going to rent them all, because that's an investment that some people do. So they will own every single one of them. And then, so they're not subdividing. They're one big plat anyway. And so we would just.
So in every one of these 5 zones, and I got a couple questions on the commercial, but every one of these calls for an 18-month timeout on the zoning. So if somebody comes in and gets PUD zone, 18 months, if they haven't acted on it, time's out. This is my personal feeling, and it depends on the rest of the council, how they want to look at it. If somebody's going to go through the public hearing and put the time into getting the zoning, I'm fine if the application side of that time's out, but my feeling is if the zoning shouldn't change until they go through another application, or until somebody else comes in with a different public hearing and application process. Does that make sense?
It does. And I see that, I can debate both sides of it, I
think the application should time out because of the parcel we've got off Telegraph. I mean, that had a mini golf idea that just didn't work, but the zoning didn't change. I think those two timing issues probably can be separated personally.
Well, what tends to happen too if we don't time it out is that I've got a lot of PUDs out here that were approved, say in the 90s. Many of them, not all of them, some of the ones that never happened went into foreclosure. Then somebody comes and starts buying bits and pieces of it. And then they just want to, they're not putting in everything. And then we have this, I have to go back and rezone this back to something else. And because this was dedicated as open space as part of the PUD, so I'm not going to let them build homes in it because it's still zoned that. And so that's why I kind of like that, the fact that sometimes it just reverts back to R whatever it was, or, it could have been an RA. It kind of helps. But either way, you still have that PUD hanging out there, and they either have to build it like that or bring you out back another one.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
If the zone's there and their application's timed out, well, then great. Update your application or bring that back in. But I just don't like a zone to change from whether it's straight zone or PD zone or commercial or residential without having the public hearing process tied to it. That's just my flavor.
How does that go too with the fact that this council's decided we want to allow people to get a PUD zone without having the PUD development as part of that? So
we've separated the zone from the application.
Exactly,
it's preferable to have the application come in at the same time.
Well, what I'm saying though, that would facilitate the fact that zone stays PUD. The application time's out, but the zone stays the same. Still zone PUD.
Okay, so they would have to reapply.
They'd have to bring a new application back in for that zone, but it's still zone PUD.
You okay with that, Drew?
I am, and I'm trying to remember if I even put in there that it goes back to the original. It might be at the bottom, and we'll touch that. But I'm glad you brought this up. I wanted to point. Where are you at? Give me a reference, like a 9.8F.
You got it right there.
Is this it? Does it say it?
Conceptual plan. Deferred conceptual plans will have a time limitation of 18 months.
That's a conceptual plan, which would be
that's if they defer. That gets back to the deferral.
But
no, I'll show you where you're talking about. It's later on. I'll find it for you.
No, I'm going to find it.
No, you do, but I'm going to just reference this because this is a thing that the council has offered for people, and I think it's a great thing that they've done. This letter B at the top, the conceptual plan, the zone change application shall include a conceptual plan and supporting text materials, which is all referenced, or later in this section, describes the proposed land uses, density, and the proposal relationship to the city's general plan, as well as elevations of the proposed buildings within the development. And here's the kicker that the council wanted to put in. If the applicant wishes to defer the conceptual plan design approval to a later date, they may do so. Deferred conceptual plans will have a time limitation of 18 months. So you're going to give them the zone change of PUD, whatever it may be. They have 18 months from that point to come back and then propose to you their whole plan. Okay.
But if that doesn't happen, does it defer back to the original zoning?
Well, this is the point. And then this is the other thing. They can take up to 3 years to actually get this thing going, because you can take advantage of the 18 months, come in on the 17th month, 3rd week and 2nd day, and get your, at least propose it, get it out there and get it approved by the city council. Now, the one that Council Bellison's looking at, it's toward the end of the chapter. So it should be right above.
I know I read it. Okay, it's time limitations. This one is under residential short-term rental.
Well, did I put the time limitations under
There's
each one of the
time
3?
limitations under that one is J.
That the other way, right there, time
Okay.
limitations.
This should be in actually all of them.
Building permits for construction within PUD zones must be obtained within 18 months of the approval of a zone change to the PUD.
Shall revert to the
If
previous
18 months elapses, the zoning of the property shall revert to the previous zoning of the property prior to the zone change to PUD.
Now, if the council feels collectively they don't want that there to revert back, we can scratch that. And what it is that what it becomes is it's just timed out. They'd have to start the process. Well, they'd have to come, I guess the thing is they would have to reapply again for this.
I bring it up. I know there's one PUD that the developer is threatened, I guess, for lack of a better term, to just let it time out so he can go back to straight zoning and not have to deal with the PUD that he created for himself. And my attitude is the PUD was created. The neighbors now know what's going there. I just don't like that public hearing being out of the process of a zone change.
Well, they're really not out of a loop because, again, understanding PUD for what it is, it's customized zoning.
Right.
Okay. And they're asking to go to something different than your standard zoning. The standard zoning was there. Let's just pick one. It was an R110 zone lot. They come in, went through, and they were going to give you this beautiful development. And then for whatever reason, it never came about. Mm-hmm. So really, the neighbors aren't losing anything that was there originally before that customized zoning came on. Does that make sense? It goes right back to the R110 that was there as whatever ground it was before. It's not like there's any shiftiness or people left out of any loop. It just goes back to what it was. That's how I would look at it.
I understand that. I get it. But if we've got a PUD that the neighbors, okay, this PUD is coming in, next thing it goes back to the straight standard R110, R18, R112, whatever it is. And, you said it before, R110, they can pull a manufactured home up, set up camp. The neighbors will say, wait a second, we were supposed to be this PUD. Now I've got, this other project there.
I kind of like the idea that at least the neighbors are notified with a public hearing that it's going back to an R something. I think they should be notified.
Well, or you don't do it at all. And I'm gonna tell you, history is one of my great, it's like Dr. Phil moment here. History. But as I go through every PUD that I've almost brought forward to a planning commission, city council, it's very rarely that there's going to be a handful of a huge group of people that are okay with that PUD. Most of them are dead against it. You know, so it's not like you're going to be hurting anybody's feelings. As I'm just telling you a little bit of history, and I think Councilman Turner's been here long enough to know I'm talking about almost every PUD. It's always a tough pill
Well,
to
that's the
swallow.
change. That's the change that's taking place. And so
Yeah.
we got people that are concerned with the change, and
Yeah.
people that are here, and so.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, my
But
feeling is, as has been discussed, to me, when that zone was changed, the zone's changed, and that's flat out just changed. And if you want to revert it back, it goes through the same process. It's a zone change process. But that's kind of been my argument all along. It's like no different. Let's change the zone, then the plat comes, and the process is the same, whether it's PUD,
Because the
R110,
PUD is a
12,
zone.
commercial. It's all the same process.
Yeah.
And that would cover all the notices and
Yeah, covers everything.
Well, there would be none.
if it reverts.
So
Anyway, that would be my feeling, is that we just scratch it out and that it doesn't time out.
I think we ought to add in there, it's highly encouraged that at the zone change, the PUD plan come with it. The application come at the same time. Like I've said before, zone change here, application here, whether it comes in at the same time or whether it's deferred, you know, I'd rather have those as separate things. I think we ought to put in there, it's recommended and preferred that the application come in at the same time, but still have the deferral process. I'd like to see that statement in there, at least, that's our preference.
Okay.
So
On 9.8F2, we talk about the recommendations coming in from the Planning Commission. And we use the word we accept, the council accepts. I'm wondering if we want to say we receive.
Good idea. I like it.
where's this at? And I'm
9-8F-2.
well, you're back at the beginning.
Except kind of implies that we.
Yeah, further on you read about all the choices the city council has, and so it's clear that it's not accept in that we approve, but accept is closer to approve than receive is. So I just changed that word to receive.
Receive the recommendations of the planning commission and schedule a public hearing.
Mhm.
okay, I got one for you, Drew.
In case you
Any
didn't have
problems with
enough.
that, Drew?
Are you talking about on D?
You just changed the word received instead of accept. So the council will receive the recommendations of the planning commission and schedule a public hearing rather than they'll accept the recommendations. Almost sounds like it's saying, okay, here's the recommendations for approval or denial from the planning commission. You're going to accept that and then schedule a public hearing rather than saying, we're going to receive that and then schedule a public hearing. Just a verbiage change that probably is a positive verbiage change.
I found as I was reading through it, wishing on some of these items that I had a link to the ordinance that related to it. Just right in there that I could click on and pull that in, because this is kind of the short form. And then you reference, you know, what all the rules are regarding height, what all the rules are regarding setbacks and stuff. But I did find myself just formatting, looking for maybe a link that would take me right into that. So if I were going through this and making an application, I could quickly go over to what the details of that meant. Okay, it's just a suggestion, won't make any difference in the language. And then I found myself wishing that we had a list of, well, for example, we've talked about trees, and I saw that if they put trees in, they get some density consideration. But we had talked about maybe requiring trees, and that's not in here. I don't know, maybe we didn't decide that we were going to require the trees, but it should be before we give density bonus. It should be part of that 50% and what we require if we're going to do that. So we probably need some more dialogue about that. And then the other thing that I noticed was I found myself realizing that probably I'm not going to get design standards at this point in our discussions, but that we could recommend design standards so that as we look at, I know that we have a reference to lighting and there's a minimum standard, but we've talked about standards. We've talked about the parking, and I know that that got referenced in here. But it does seem to me like we're moving towards some minimum design standards for these developments that we want, that if we're not at the point where we want to say required, we maybe could at least help move the city in the direction we want to go by saying recommended, and give them a hint about what happens when you bring those PUDs and what we're really looking for. And we have a lot of it, but I think we might still be missing some of it. Noise ordinances, lighting, and maybe we don't require it, but I think it would be helpful to me if I were coming in with a PUD to get a good look at what the city's after, because I know we've put some developers through a lot of rigor trying to figure out together what those standards are, and maybe help if we were a little helpful in that regard without maybe making it a requirement.
Especially like the part with your lighting, having lived in a PUD and trying to secure the neighborhood after the fact and decide whose home was now going to get an exterior light put on it so the neighborhood would be safer, becomes somewhat of a challenge. So I like that on the front end of it. We look at the lighting and those and say, okay, whether it's every intersection, whether it's how it is that we do. That's one thing in PUDs that we really don't ever consider is lighting and safety of the neighborhoods in there, especially if we have children in them after dark, because most of the time those PUDs are narrower streets where people are walking. There's not sidewalks generally. It's usually in the streets we put them. And so I appreciate that fact the lighting comes up, because that's something I hadn't thought of.
It's in here as letter K. You have to provide your lighting plan in here. So we've tried to put some of those things that we've been missing for a while.
But do we have in our minds some standards for that lighting? I think we're starting to, and it would be nice if we could give them some recommendations that would give them a head start on these PUDs, because we've kind of been guessing back and forth a little bit about what we want. And I know we've left some of those developers trying to read our minds, and we're trying to read our own minds. But as we start to get clarity on that, and I think we have been, it'd be nice to put it somewhere so somebody, can get a PUD approval in a maybe shorter amount of time than it has taken some of these PUDs.
Drew, can you look at under, see 9-10E-7?
You're going all the way to the commercials already.
Oh, I thought we were already there.
No, sorry. Oops, I just.
Is there any, that's before we go, there's any other discussion from residentially from the council? Then we'll
Did you
move on.
guys look through roughly? I mean, the biggest one we were wanting that we threw in here was, of course, which I didn't have a chance to get to, was the short-term vacation rental. We're going to take that out of overlay zones. We're going to, when this happens, we're going to, I'm going to have that particular overlay zone will then be stricken from the city code, and this will indeed take its place. But did everybody have a chance to get through the short-term vacation?
Well, what I thought has, we keep talking about if they want greater density, what they're going to do, and that they can get it and then get greater density doing certain things. But what if we decide we'd like to have lesser density? I mean, can't we be flexible both directions?
Oh, we probably could, but if usually they're coming in for a PUD because of density.
I know.
I mean, 98 out of 100 of them are going to be because they want to get better density. Most of them would go straight zoning. In fact, if I'm a developer and I wanted, the bigger thing, I'm going to go straight zoning. Is what most of them will do if they want to have the bigger lots and those things. That almost takes care of itself.
But in the course of that negotiation, it's almost unpredictable what we're going to end up with at this point. So,
oh yeah, that's why it's negotiating zoning.
Okay, so we might want flexibility both directions if we don't have it. The only other thought I had was we've talked a lot about with short-term rentals, greater recreational resources available, because they are short-term rentals and they do have those expectations, and we don't have that in the code. We've got the same recreational requirements we have on those other kinds of zoning. So
I have in my notes that there's a section on antennas. Do you know where that's at? Because I'm having a hard time finding it.
That's a whole different ordinance we're going to propose to you here.
It was in this.
Antennas in this?
Was it? Oh, no. You know what? You're right.
You'll yeah. Well, that's your next.
Up my notes. My bad.
You're good.
I was just going to say, Drew, that anything that would make the process easier to approve a site plan, no matter what the densities are, if it could be an easier process, then that's something that needs to be done, because I think that we're very sympathetic when someone comes in wanting a PUD. We want to grant that if it's all inclusive, and that's what we want. So I think that's a good step in the right direction.
So again, please spend a little time in the next few weeks on that short-term one. Make sure you're okay there, and any suggestions that you'd like to do. Now, the second one is that, and right now, currently, just to explain, our plan unit development has both residential and commercial in the same chapter. I'm going to break this out. As you can see, the residential one is under 8F. That's our, so we're going to be adding a new Article F. The commercial is actually going to be pulled out and put with the commercial zones. It's going to become Article G, and it'll be at the back end of your C1, C2, and those zones. And so we are going to separate, because a lot of people didn't even realize we had a commercial PUD, because they just pulled a PUD, and the first part of it just talks about housing, et cetera. And at the back end of it was the commercial side. So to help make that easier, we're going to have the commercial PUD will be with the commercial zones behind it. So now, again, we basically created two of them. We have our standard, they can come in and do a plan unit development commercial, and then they can do or industrial. It works both for either one of those. Or they can come in and ask for a mixed use. And this is something where is a benefit, because right now I think in a C3, you can ask for an apartment above a shop is the best you can do for residential, unless you went to our downtown mixed use zone, which we created a while, that's never taken off. But this will allow for different options to come in for mixed use if they want to do a certain development that'll create apartments and things like that with mixed, retail and things like that. So this opens that door up a little bit more too for those kind of developments. It's kind of back to the old how they used to develop places back east in the big cities where people owned their business below and lived upstairs in the two floors above, and just walked downstairs, opened up their shop, and did business. Those kind of things. I'd like to see those come back, and this kind of is one of those things that would bring that. So, but you had a question on
10E7 land coverage. Well, two things. One is with respect to the setbacks, I'd like to see that same verbiage on the commercial that we did in the other.
So they can propose something to you is what you want to see. So, okay.
But under land coverage, it says for mixed use projects, building coverage may exceed 50% of the lot or parcel acreage, provided that a minimum of 25% of the lot or parcel is maintained in landscaped area. I don't know, parking takes a whole lot of real estate, so I don't know how.
I thought we were going to change our parking standards and bring them down.
Well, maybe so, but you're still only going to get, give or take, 20 to 25 on the high side building coverage ratio on commercial. So.
Well, and this one's hard to play with.
25% of landscaping in the commercial with the parking requirements that are in place might be tough in some developments.
Shall we just add in landscape or open space? Because open space could mean a variety of things then that way.
Well, if you do that, how much room do you have for parking? And how does that mesh with our required parking? If they take over 50% on the building and 25% in landscaping, that leaves you less than 25% possibly, conceivably, if it goes over 50% in parking. Is that enough?
Well, and then you have to throw, and I'm going to throw another wrench in your spoke here. It all depends on what the use is in the building. Because some buildings, if they're multi-storage, that's not going to be an issue.
Right.
Other ones, if it's heavy retail and you're down to the 5 per 1,000 parking, again, it's going to be hard. I mean, we almost have to leave things.
Needs to allow.
Well, this one
that.
specifically too says it for mixed use projects. So you're gonna have mixed use, so you're gonna have people living in that thing. So you're gonna have to have parking stalls for more than just an hour.
Yeah, I don't know. I only bring it up because the numbers didn't seem to jive with me, but
Well, maybe that's why the word may is in there, because it all depends on how the project, you can, but you're going to have to hit everything else as well. See, it doesn't mean that they can go above that. They still have to quantify for all these other things as well.
Gives you the option to be flexible if.
Because there may be that option that someone, so we don't have to come back and say, man, they were able to do it, but we don't have anything for them. Well, May allows them. They're going to be limited as they lay out this project, and they have to hit their parking, they have to hit the minimum landscaping, then they have whatever. But there may be an option that someone could do it, I guess.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That's why I really maybe not want to tweak it.
6 stories high, maybe. But
Well, but you never, again, you don't know, because again, if it's a massive, where we're going to give them 1 per 1,000 parking stalls because it's mostly a storage type of a thing, they may be able to pull that off, and we may want to and then we can allow it to be. So
Okay.
I'm just saying, because that we don't know what's coming because we don't know what's proposed. Hopefully that helps there.
Any more discussion for Drew?
But again, in the commercial though, you wanted me to allow the parking, let them bring some proposals to you is that right? Is everybody?
Setbacks.
Oh, sorry.
Depending
I
on-
got parking in my
Just
head.
leave that clause in there that depending on the project and design that.
I'm going to have
My
all
recommendation,
setbacks. The verbiage is going to be the same in all of them, is what we
Everything,
want to
that's
do.
Any other discussion for Drew? If not, we'll look for, this is a public hearing. So we'll open it up to the public. If anyone would like to come forward and speak to our new ordinance, PUD ordinances that are being proposed, or any ideas or thoughts that you could share with us, we certainly would welcome that. Just ask that you state your name for the record as you come forward.
My name's Aaron Olson. I represent Sullivan Homes. I just wanted to express appreciation for all the hard work that we have additional choices in our PUD ordinance from a developer standpoint. It's truly needed, and we appreciate the hard work of Drew Ellerman and all those involved with this, because it'll benefit our city. Thanks.
Aaron, Aaron, have you had a chance to read it? I'm just curious what his thoughts.
We'll see that you get a copy.
Yeah.
Anyone else would like to come forward and speak to this? Seeing none, council, I'll bring it back to close our public hearing.
you want a motion?
Mhm.
I move that we close the public hearing, and perhaps with a caveat that we consider sending copies of this new ordinance out to some of the major developers and ask for specific feedback. We want to correct it before we approve it.
Correct. Good idea. Motion is for closure.
Second.
Councilman Granger, seconded by Councilman Belliston.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Bellis and I.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. Item 10, public hearing for consideration to approve an ordinance amending a portion of the city code, the Title IX zoning regulations, Chapter 14, supplementary and qualifying regulations, and adding a new Section 26, wireless telecommunications facilities, 9-14-26, applicant Washington City.
Thank you. This one's actually been brought about. We've been actually approving a few of the wireless to telecommunications like Verizon and folks like that are putting up towers for better phone coverage. And now the big push is, because our phones are what they are, mini computers, TVs, whatever you can imagine you can do on your phone. Now the data has become, it's not so much getting, being able to talk to grandma clearly as you're driving down the road. It's all the data that's needed to whatever you do on your phone. So that's changed the industry quite a bit. Where it used to be they wanted big, tall towers to be above everything to let all the waves go that phones would work. Now, because of the data needs, the towers need to be shorter, lower to the ground, and more of them. And so with that, we're trying to stay ahead of not having a tower like a 7-Eleven on every street corner, so to speak, because that seems like almost the direction we're heading. So some other cities have been a little bit farther along in this than us. Some of them have had that already hit them in the past years. Our planning commission, after going through our last CUP for a Verizon tower, really felt strong about looking into adopting a wireless communication ordinance. And so we had 3 of them to choose from. We had one of our planning commissioners is an attorney and has worked with Springdale, but also was able to, the one that he wrote for his client came from the city of Lehigh. I got both those, read them over. I really liked Lehigh's because it was half the pages. And as we read it, it seemed like a lot of the things that we could bring into Washington to help regulate these towers, where they go and how they go within the city. Basically, I'll start off the purpose of this particular section is to establish location, appearance, and safety standards that will help mitigate potential impacts related to the construction, use, and maintenance of telecommunication facilities. 2, to provide for the orderly establishment of telecommunications facilities within the city. 3, to minimize the number of antenna support structures by encouraging the location of antennas and pre-existing support structures, encouraging the use of stealth facilities, encouraging the co-location of multiple antennas and put them more on single structures, and encouraging the use of city-owned property for those antenna support structures. And 4th, to comply with the Telecommunications Act of 1996 by establishing regulations that do not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provisions of personal wireless services, do not unreasonably discriminate among providers of functionally equivalent services, and are not based on the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the federal communications regulations concerning such emissions. So that's the preface of what this basic change is all about, and putting this in. Washington City had no regulation. We just said an antenna had to be a CUP. And that was the extent of our, because back in the day, there wasn't much more than that. We just, you didn't have a lot of antennas. And if you did, you had to come in and just show where they're going to go, how they're going to look. And we just did it under a CUP. Now with this flood of change that's happening in our society and the use of these, a lot of cities, and us included, feel very strong that we needed to create ordinances. So I hope you had a chance to go through, hit this. We basically, we go through the definitions, of course, and talk about the different kind of antennas that are out there. We did say that this is under here that brings out the council once that they're going to adopt this ordinance, but then everything else will either be a permitted or a conditional use if you've read in the ordinance later. Permitted uses will just have to have staff's approval because then there's a few of those that they're minor. Most of them are going to be under the conditional use permit process, which the planning commission will then review. And then it gives all the standards of how they have to show what they're going to show and where it's going to be. I don't know if there was anything that we could go through again. This is 15 pages.
The only thing that really popped up for me is it just says antennas. And I think there's a difference between a commercial antenna and a residential single person antenna. So I'd like to see something in there that says, hey, this is for commercial applications and not residential. Because it says,
well, what kind of antennas?
For example, multifamily antennas, you need to get a CUP for. I don't, how often do you see satellite dishes or antennas on a multifamily structure that it only feeds that one residence? It's not for transmitting commercial.
Well, I guess the question I need to ask is, what are you referring to? What kind of antenna would be on a residential home?
I've had people request that we install an antenna for over-the-air TV.
Okay, this applicability doesn't apply to them. This is what D covers. If I can just hit that real quick, this section applies to both commercial and private low-power radio services and facilities such as cellular or PCS communications and paging systems. All cellular facilities shall comply with regulations set forth in this section and any pertinent regulations of the Federal Communications Commission. But then it just goes on, neither the term telecommunication facility nor the requirements of this section shall apply to the following types of communication devices. Although they may be regulated by other city ordinances, they're not regulated by this. Okay. So one is amateur radio. Does this cover, I think, what you were worried about? Okay. Anything satellite and TV is, we don't worry. Now in the multifamily one, it's talking about what's happened is some of these companies will come to a big apartment complex and ask to put in a small tower that helps, you know, so it would, if it's a commercial thing, they then have to follow this. We did one where we
volunteered because we got free internet.
Right.
Out of it at the project. So
yeah. So this takes away all those personal things, you know, especially if it has to do with your own personal TV. This does not regulate that.
All right.
So now the big thing that we did put in here, because this is what gets so technical for the city, and this is what helps us, is that this E covers a lot of what our concerns have been. We don't have a lot of specialists here that know about these kind of towers or all that has to do with it. So what we, as part of our ordinance, is that they have to get this reviewed by an expert review, and there's companies out there that do this now. And it says you will have to, if you know some of these criteria, because you're asking for certain things, you will have to, you know, follow. So then those experts are going to look at this design. They're going to look at the data that's given, because we sit there and go, they're going to say, well, we have to have within this mile radius because of these, and I'm not even going to try to make up the words, but there's all these technical terms that a lot of city staff aren't familiar with, but there's companies that out there. So what this does is allow us to send this application off to an expert. And he's going to say, okay, and he's going to try to protect both sides and just say, here's what I see, and here's what I think they need to do, and what I think you folks should, you know, are okay with. And
I think you might want to use an either or language, because there may be someday when you do have that expertise on staff, and if your ordinance says that they will provide or seek expertise in order to accomplish the following, that gives you that option should you ever have that expertise on staff. You don't always have to go third party.
I like that.
Will to may.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea that I guess the worry I have is sometimes that we're always trying to watch out for ourselves and not feel like anybody, because if we, you know, if our person on board says, well, I'm letting this one go, but I'm not letting this one go, then we're always set up for discrimination.
You add the term expertise. You're requiring that to be somebody who knows what they're doing. You may someday have that person.
And there may be someday we would. So
there's a dollar amount up to $7,500. What if it goes over? Does that mean we're on the hook? I mean, I think that's a generous budget. But
that is a good question, you know. And so again, this is what the two different ordinances I looked at had the same thing. I think what they found is that they really haven't come across one that broke 7,500. I think, you know, what we can do is I can talk with Jeff and say we might be able to add a line that says if it goes above this, that, you know, if it's going to get there, we may just put this on hold and say, hey, it's going to cost more. Are you guys willing to pay that to do this? But
instead of the applicant will pay all costs associated with the third party review, period. And delete that second half of the sentence.
I guess we could, but I do like having the $2,000 deposit.
I'm done.
Is that okay?
No, I'm fine with the deposit on it. But
Drew, my question is under the number 3, the abandonment, in consideration that there's a $2,000 deposit. You know, it says the city may remove the structure and bill its costs for removing the structure to the operator. That seems troublesome. Is there any way to have an escrow account or have something set up so that if that happens, we don't have to go through that process?
Where is that?
That's actually down later on in the,
abandonment B violation.
Again,
did I buzz by it already?
Number 3. It just seems like that if more and more of those are going to be built, you can run some of them are going to have to be removed for whatever reasons. And it just seems like having something in place up front would make that a lot less work for the city.
Well, yeah, and I've already suggested using language that we have in our, when we lease the land. So we have some language we could use, Drew, that we've used in those leases we've drafted when we're leasing our land to these, that they deposit some type of a bond that would, you know, a removal
that would
bond.
cover it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know they do them because we have them with ones we've done, so we could probably just include that language. I don't know,
Is
that would need to come back.
Would that be ones that are just kind of like a paper one that we get that they have their bank write and say, or is this going to be a hard cash?
Because there's only so many insurance companies around here to do it, but it's I think it's very specific when they do it. And so far, I get to see either municipalities or when representing private clients leasing land, that they've objected to that. So apparently you can get it, it's not that big a deal. So maybe we can just include that language and make it subject to approval of community development director and city attorney. It's pretty generic.
Well, it seems prudent because it puts the responsibility onto them.
We don't have a problem putting it in, and I don't think it's something that needs necessarily to come back, because I've yet to see someone that leases land that objected to that provision.
Well, do you want to make it an either or you want to just go, because everybody feel the consensus, they want it to be bonded, period? I guess that's the question. Do we?
Well, how long could you end up hanging on to a bond?
See, I don't know the bond or an escrow account or whatever the.
Well, the bond's really just an insurance policy, so they don't have to put a lot of money up front. The escrow could be costly. I can see why they wouldn't want to put in a, $20,000 deconstruction, but
well, even
they could certainly have that option. Or maybe we put that they should bond for it or the equivalent acceptable to the city. Because I mean, we do that with completion.
I'd be
bonds
good
all
with
the time.
that. Yeah.
I just can't imagine somebody wanting to put the money in escrow. I think it'd take the bond every time.
We just want something in there because we all know what happens if all of a sudden they pack suitcase and hightail it out. We're stuck with this.
We don't want to be left holding the bag, do we?
Right. Or the tower
or the tower.
Antenna or the, yeah.
We can always put up, or as otherwise approved by the city council, because it's going to come in front of the city council anyway, right?
I think we have a prime example of that out in Sienna Hills, don't we?
Yes.
I think they're still using it. That's what I asked, and someone said they were.
Used? I didn't think it ever got used.
I know, but
Okay.
I want to see how they're using it. I guess that's what I should. But that's the perfect one of the perfect examples is what it could be. There's a massive dish out there.
Put a pine tree.
And then you have 3 or 4 other paragraphs in there that refer to our only solution is a third-party assessment, which you just may want to put some either or language in those.
Anything else, Drew, you need clarified?
Well, I just
You
wanted to go
understand
through, I
kinda where
think,
we're
there are some folks here. I know there is somebody who wants to come in, and because they came to staff developer and I told them this was a pending ordinance, they'd have to, during the public hearing, address you folks. So unless you have any other questions for me, I think.
That's the kind we want to hear from, because they're the ones in the heat of the battle. We like.
But
to
I
know what the
think I might
challenges
have answers for what their concerns are, but I'm not sure I wanted to hear them live and in the public hearing, and then we can probably address, I think, what might help them anyway.
are. Any other questions from council at this point? Awesome. Then we'll go ahead and open this public hearing to consideration of approving an ordinance, amending a portion of our city code, Title IX zoning regulations, Chapter 14, supplementary and qualifying regulations, and adding a new Section 26 talks about wireless telecommunications facilities. So anyone that would like to come forward to speak to this, we'd love to hear from you. Just make sure you state your name for our record, please.
My name is Ray Carpenter.
Gail Cooper Smith.
Aaron Smith. I guess the concern I have is something I've seen, and maybe I've seen an advanced copy of this ordinance, and I may not be in it now because I heard a lot of things tonight that I didn't read in the original, but there's a section that directly affects AM radio stations, of which we're building one, and it's a license to be in Washington City on Cooper property down below, the old Cooper property down below on the riverbed. We've gone through the Army Corps of Engineers, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Communications Commission. This license was applied for 13 years ago. Just to give you a little example of the work that's gone into getting this thing done. Your ordinance specifically says there shall not be a lattice tower nor a guide tower, at least the ordinance I read. An AM radio station, by definition, is both a lattice tower and a guide tower. And I know the purpose and intent is to work with the modern change of LTE and all of the new two-way radio technologies that exist for cell phones. But this also would bother the radio station immensely. We're at the very end of a long travail to get this station licensed, and this ordinance directly hits that. And we would ask that that section at least be modified to accept AM radio stations in a proper area. And I think that's where the question comes, what's a proper area? The improvement that would be done on the property down that belongs to the Smiths, by the Smiths are partners on the radio station. But the area down there would be an improvement, because that tamarask is a detriment to even the Environmental Protection Agency rules, because it hurts the two birds they try to protect. The rule we've got is that we have to leave the trees in place on the riverbed, but we need to remove the tamarask to be able to put the tower down there. The beautiful part about that location is it's low in altitude, and so it's not visible to the community. It's a low power station. It's only 1,000 watts. And an area of that tamarask would be cleared to affect that. And the Corps of Engineers has placed restrictions on the method of clearing it. We would ask that the ordinance take into account something like a radio station and its location.
Specifically, as I understood it, talking about your lattice and guide towers in that way, that's the verbiage
This
that
section
concerns you.
specifically says lattice and guide towers shall not be permitted. And that directly affects an AM radio station.
Is that the only kind of towers that are available for AM radio stations?
No,
or is
that's
that
the
just
kind of tower
commonly
it has
used
to
ones?
be.
That's what they have to be. It
Yeah.
has to be one of those two type to be a radio
The
station.
tower itself is insulated from the ground. It sits on a ceramic ball. And so it has to not be connected
Be
to the
grounded,
ground.
basically. Yeah. Okay. That's why we like you guys. You give us some education.
It's the station, by the way, would be a good thing for the community, because the office will be in Washington. The place we're located will be in Washington. It's licensed to Santa Clara, but everything about it would be in Washington.
Any questions for
Others?
discussionary that anybody need any more enlightening from the council?
Well,
Or
just the way it reads, the following antenna types and antenna locations are not permitted except upon a showing of necessity, inability to achieve coverage or capacity in the service area by the applicant, in which case they shall be considered as conditional use.
So it
So
could
I
go
don't
through
know
the-
if it's inability to achieve coverage or capacity or new
Those
New
are
station.
cellular terms,
not TV.
broadcast station terms.
I think it just sounds like just go to the planning commission for a CUP conditional use permit, and that's permitted under that clause, which we haven't even adopted yet, so.
So, or maybe we could include verbiage that may include AM radio stations as part of it. So we
Specifically.
use verbiage
We
to
could
this.
say that specifically, and then
Yeah,
they
just
wouldn't
say
have to
that
go
that goes through.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
Ray, is the same as
Or is
true
this
for FM?
grandfathered?
I mean, we haven't passed this yet, so
Well, I don't think we have an application at this point either,
They wouldn't let us put in an application.
knowing that this was coming
because of
forward.
this ordinance.
So there is no grandfather
well,
at
then
this
I
point.
think maybe we put some words in
Some
here that
verbiage in there that helps to
clarify
clarify that.
particular.
Ray, is the same true for FM also? It's a lattice and guide tower?
That is not hold true for FM radio
Just
stations.
Just AM?
FM radio stations can be mounted on, in fact, this station will have one AM and three FMs. One FM located on Webb Hill, one FM located on Tokerville Mountain, and one FM in Cedar City. So all of them will be broadcasting exactly the same programming simultaneously. So this AM station is key to making the whole thing work.
So as a
That's why-
staff, we can say that at least Drew and I don't have the expertise, which is why we have a provision up there, and otherwise that an expert will review some of these. So we don't even, I don't think we have the knowledge, Drew may, I certainly don't have the knowledge of understanding how AM stations operate and what consistency or inconsistency or what the ramifications or unintended consequences of that would be. We just don't know, guys. You guys clearly know a lot more than we do. Drew may know, but I certainly don't. I'm certainly not capable of saying that just by specifically exempting AM station. I just don't know. I
Why
have
don't
no
we just,
idea.
well, there should be,
Why don't
I
we
think we
just-
could add some verbiage that would put it through the process, that rather than outright outline them,
That's
so.
what the language does
Okay.
now.
Does-
They just show, they just have to show, except upon showing the necessity, that the inability to achieve their coverage, and it says, the only way they can get their coverage is through a lattice. AM, that's what it is, that's grounds.
It's already
for
covered.
the planning.
Okay.
I assume, I mean,
Yeah,
it's been
it's
there.
already-
Well, I think it covers.
Can do that.
their
It does.
scenario.
Okay.
And they can
That-
explain that, and they can explain the necessity at that time to the planning commission, because,
Well, and that can happen in,
Yeah.
in one night.
Sure.
That conditional use permit doesn't come to our offices again, so that's a fairly rapid.
My name
way
is
to
Morgan
read.
Skinner. I'm with Ray as a broadcast consultant. That's what I've done for the last 50 years. I've built 7 AM radio stations. As you have learned, the tower is the radiator. That's what is sending the signal to you. And that's why an AM radio station at night disappears. That signal hits a skywave and bounces down. You can hear KSL in the Netherlands, but you can't hear it in St. George. That's part of the problem we have. One of the blessings 15 years ago, this young lady met with me and we put an FCC application together for this specific project that Mr. Carpenter has acquired. Ralph McClure was the one who suggested we go talk to the Smiths about property down here in the industrial area. We didn't want another problem like we had over on the hill with the residential issues. And what Mr. Carpenter has done, because of his expertise, is he's hired an FCC engineer that Mr. Starkey's referred to, the expertise to reduce the tower from 265 feet to 105. So there's not going to be a visual obstruction. It'll be obscured by all the power. And so this has been a 15-year project for Gail and myself, something that I've dedicated to, and I was shocked after 13 years, this year we got a grant at a specific location. And this and we've met with Mr. Elliman and his staff and explained the challenge. We look forward to having that exception that Mr. Starkey has talked about. We thank you very much.
I just want to say in the comment, I think your expertise has come.
That's Ray. Ray, what's the venue of the new radio station?
It's going to be KZEZ. You've probably heard that
I
call
remember
letters before,
KZEZ,
but they got taken off the station, A station here in St. George, and Mr. Skinner locked them up at the FCC, and I got a chance to put it back. And by the way, the format will be something that you'll enjoy because there will be no rock music played on the station. The station is going to be, if you can't understand the words to the songs, it won't be played. That's my rule. And I know that my partners will tell you the same thing, that the music will be 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. There's some in the 90s. This music, there's a lot of it out there that you can sit down and listen to quietly and truly enjoy. So the reason for this station is that it's going to be.
You know, Ray, I remember the 70s music, and there's still music I haven't understood from that time period.
There's a lot of music in every one of those periods that is beautiful music, and there's some humorous music, which I'm a fan of humorous music, and it would be a good thing for the community. We've located it here, the office here in Washington also. So I think it's going to be a good thing for the community.
Well, thank you for
Thanks, Rick.
bringing your concerns to us. It certainly helps us to be a little more educated as to what decisions we're making and putting in place there. So thank you. Any others that would like to speak to this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for closure of our public hearing.
So moved.
Motion to close by Councilman Belliston.
Second.
Second by Councilman Ivy.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Belliston, aye.
Nice night.
Turek, aye.
If I may, just let these folks on both these two items, this will be heard by the council and for action more than likely on January 10th. Because there is no meeting coming up at the end of the year. It's 2 days after Christmas. So the next city council meeting will be January 10th.
And that's where
these things will be decided on.
Finalized. Thank you for clarifying that.
Well, Andrew, appreciate all the hard work on this.
Yes.
This has been probably a year coming or longer. Yes, a lot of hard work.
All right, item C, public hearing. Public hearing for consideration to approve internally finance the fleet replacement model for fiscal year 2018. The principal amount not to exceed $175,000 will be loaned from the water fund to the fleet fund for a term of 5 years. The interest rate will be a fixed rate of 2% compounded semi-annually. This is our applicant, Washington City. This is following up on what we made official a little earlier in our meeting. So, Kimberly, do we need to have any more discussion? We'll just basically open this up to a public hearing. This is part of the process that is in place for any time that the city loans funds to other funds within the city. We have to go through a public process, or citizens know what monies are moving around within our community. It's makes it so it's open and everybody understands it. So with that, we'll go ahead and open our public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and speak concerning our funding of our fleet fund through our water fund, we'd welcome anyone.
My name is Doug Ward. Just wanted a clarification on the loan or the money that's being lended. It sounds like it's in a lease format. Is that correct?
It's not necessarily it's an internal loan, it's all of it. So,
Right.
for the fleet replacement model, it's basically we're purchasing all whatever the vehicles have been identified for the year. So for this one, we're looking at 6 police vehicles. So it would be purchased upfront, 100%, and then but the money source is coming from the water fund, and so the fleet fund over the course of 5 years would pay that money back. So it's not a lease; it's an internal loan.
So it's actually
It's a loan from the fleet fund, from the water fund to the fleet fund. Yes.
And then but the plan that you talked about earlier was for a more like a 10-year rotation, but this is set up as 5 years, right?
So the funding, the vehicles, we only plan on exchanging and rolling them out every 10 years, but you're correct. We're looking at only financing it for 5 years. On an internal loan, we are able to do it up to 10 years if we chose to do that, but we chose to keep it within the same time frame that we would normally hold the investments, because what we're doing is we're having these funds forego money they would invest on the market, and they're investing internally, and we wouldn't invest beyond a 5-year time period. And so we've limited it to that in terms of the payback. So they'll be paid off for 5 years before they start to roll back,
So it's similar to buying a vehicle with a
and then
5-year
keeping
note.
it. That's right. It'd be like making a loan for 5 years, but then you personally own the vehicle for a 10 total.
And then just a question on one of the documents from a previous meeting where the city was selling, there was actually 5 vehicles in there, but the 3, I'm just trying to understand the city's vehicle replacement plan there, and this was from 11/7, at least that's where I received it there. So what
two
were
different processes. One is for fleet vehicles, and another one is we have certain fleet vehicles that are on a
yearly,
more of an annual rotation.
So my question is what is the purpose of the annual rotation of those vehicles?
Money.
I was going to, yeah. Ultimately, I'll preface it why Mike's coming forward. This is something that we've done over the years. We did it for 4 or 5 years back in the early 2000s.
We started it in 03,
03?
ended it in 08, and picked it up again in
2 years ago.
14.
15, yeah, 2 years ago.
In 2015. So the purpose of this is we buy vehicles on state contract pricing. We get a very good deal on these vehicles. The purpose is that we can actually purchase a vehicle on the state contract pricing. We will use that vehicle for a year, turn around, sell it, and we do that, and we follow the state procurement guidelines. We do the publicly advertise for a 2-week period. We received the sealed bids on it, publicly open the sealed bids, and we set our minimum price on that vehicle is what we paid for that vehicle. One of the reasons behind that is we have a vehicle that's always under warranties. Basically, we put fuel and do oil changes. We don't buy tires. We don't buy batteries, brakes. In turn, we turn it out to the public, and I think pretty much every single vehicle we have sold has gone to a citizen of Washington City. I can't think of anybody that's hasn't been, or at least Washington County. So it gives a good ability for residents to purchase vehicles at a good rate, and the city's out actually no money at all on it.
They've all been sold at or above what we bought them for. The vehicles in this lease program or rollout are vehicles that we need to keep for a longer period of time. And we can't afford to have those roll over every year.
Yeah, and we did try this with fleet vehicles, but there was no market for stripped down work trucks. We tried it, they didn't sell, so we eliminated that after 1 year.
So what are you using those vehicles for when they are in the city's possession?
So usually those vehicles are for a department head, somebody that, because you have to really keep those vehicles clean, no scratches, dents. So it's usually a department head that actually drives that vehicle. So they're kept in better condition.
And is there limitations on the usage of that for the department head, or is it?
Yes.
Just our vehicle.
And we have a vehicle policy with the city. So really the limit is department heads have the opportunity to drive the truck to and from home to work. And that's pretty much the limit. It's not for personal use other than just to and from work. And then just strictly city business.
Read up on the policy. Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to come and speak concerning this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for closure of our public hearing.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
for closure by Councilman Belliston, second by Councilwoman Granger.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ellis and I.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. Again, this will be formalized in right now.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead on resolutions. Our resolution A is to consideration to adopt the resolution to internally finance the fleet department model for fiscal year 2018. The principal amount not to exceed $175,000. Again, will be loaned from the water fund to the fleet fund for a term of 5 years with an interest rate to be fixed rate of 2%, compounded semi-annually.
Move approval of that resolution as stated.
Motion for approval by Councilwoman Granger,
Second.
second by Councilman Belliston.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ellis and I.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. Item 12, ordinances and resolutions. 12A, consideration to approve an ordinance granting zone change request Z-17-32 to change zoning designation from A-20, Ag 20, to R110, single-family residential 10,000 square foot lots located at approximately 1575 South and Karma Street. Applicant Sullivan Homes.
A lot of data, so I'm getting the spinning wheel. But we'll get started, and then I'll bring it up as soon as there we come. Of course, as soon as I finish saying that, it's ready to go. The 2-week holdover is completed. The item is ready for city council action. The applicant, just briefly, is seeking approval of zone change on 6.00 acres, as stated from the the Ag 20, which is agricultural 20-acre minimum, to the proposed single-family 10,000 square foot R110 designation. Just for your review, the Planning Commission held their public hearing on this on November 1st. The city council held a public hearing on this 3 weeks ago? I think 3 weeks ago in November, the last council meeting in November. The Planning Commission's recommendation was a unanimous recommendation to approve Z-1732 from A20 to the R110 zoning designation. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have had during the 2-week time period there.
Any questions for Duke Council? Any concerns that we need to address prior to moving forward?
The questions or concerns mostly that I would have would relate to the preliminary plat at that point, so I won't worry about them now, but just as a restatement for the applicant, that we'd like to make sure that there's still access up to get up on the nice hill there through that swell.
Yeah, the swell's roughly right in
Right in there.
Right in that area.
And they've stated that that was their desire too, so.
Yeah, they were going to put an access
I'm
to
not
have up
too
there.
worried about it.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, we'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve an ordinance granting zone change request Z-17-32 to change zoning designation from A20 to R110, located approximately 1575 South and Karma Street.
Second.
Motion for approval by Councilman Ivy, seconded by Councilman Belliston.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Belliston, aye.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. 12B, continuation of consideration to approve an ordinance adopting zone change request Z-17-31 to change the zoning designation from RA1, 1 acre agricultural lots, to C1 commercial, service commercial, located approximately at the corner of Merrill Road and Sandia Drive. Applicant, Washington County School District.
Guess we'll zoom in on the one that has a lot more prettiness to it. As the council's aware, this property has actually been tabled a couple of times beyond its regular 2-week holding period. Also, discussions have been had between the school district and possibilities of an alternative zoning to this. In a work session, I think over a week ago, we were able to have a good discussion and come to I think a consensus on this. So with that said, there is still the proposal to zone change this particular parcel. It is 2.42 acres and it is currently, as stated, the residential agricultural 1 acre zoning designation. Through discussions and opportunities, there is a new proposal that it be actually, instead of C1, be changed to administrative professional, which is our probably least harsh commercial zone. It's basically professional office spaces, et cetera, like that. So it could be for a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, more of the professional type of use. So with that, there was also discussions about the school kids being able to not, that right now a lot of them will just cut across the property, and it allows them to stay off the busy street of Merrill and to get off of Sandia Road as quick as they can. There is part of the condition with this is that if it does go to AP, that there would be given and dedicated to the city a 10-foot strip on the north property. It'll be at an angle there, as you can see, which will be not on the canal company's property, but on this particular piece owned by the school, that a 10-foot strip would be dedicated to the city. The city would then in turn put in a 10-foot trail and a chain link fence on the north property line to keep the kids off the canal property. And then as development comes, the developer of the parcel, whichever person does put that, they would be required anyway by the code to build a 6-foot block wall. And then that would be on the south side of that 10-foot trail. So that would take care of the concerns about what types of use will be going on the property, and also the concerns and the safety with the children. So with that, if I may, council has just proposed that that is what's before you tonight. And I would recommend, just because there is a slight change on that, it's still a commercial use, but I think it would be prudent and wise to probably open it back up for a public hearing just on that administrative professional proposal, if that is agreeable and acceptable by the city council. I'm just throwing that because of probably just be prudent, but it's up to you.
I think think it'd be fine opening up for public comment today, but a public hearing has to be noticed up.
Well, this is a
Already had public
continued
hearing on it.
This is a change, so you can take comment. Yeah, if you want to word it that way, I still just think however you want to word it would be just appropriate to probably take that comment because of that change.
I think one of the conditions of approval also was that there be a gate in the back of the school that during school hours that there's access for the students through the fence.
That's true. That was on there, and I think the school has a representative here, and I hope that's okay to put that as a
Giving us a
condition.
thumbs up, so they're agreeing.
Okay, so
thank you.
that could be added into the conditions of that there would be a gate that.
There's
would be
actually a
manned.
gate already in place there.
In that
It's
corner?
just locked, yeah.
Okay.
Just off the corner, about 10 feet.
And just for the applicant, AP is still the direction that they're comfortable with going. Okay. All right.
Does the council have any concerns with taking any public comment?
I think it'd be fine to open it up for
Okay.
it.
If that's the case, we'll go ahead and take any public comment that may be here, since it is a slight change from what the original proposal was. I think this change came from a lot of the comment that came out of that, concerns from the neighbors adjacent to it, as living conditions, as well as the neighborhood's children's safety. So I think that's, the council's heard that, the school district's heard that, and I think it's been some good positive movement together in bringing that to fruition. But if there's anyone that would like to speak further, we certainly welcome that.
Well, people are thinking that over. I'd just like to echo what you said. It was an enlightening process to be able to bring concerns forward and have responsible people step up and make decisions that I think is going to work out good for all parties involved.
Okay, seeing none of that, we'll go ahead and move. Oh.
Didn't expect that.
So there won't be any other public open meetings on this?
Not on this, no,
with the change?
we're going to take action on it tonight. Your heart's doing okay? Okay. All right, if there's no one else, I'll bring it back to council for action.
Do we need to close it? There wasn't a public hearing, so
I
we need
just
to
took
close
comment,
it.
I didn't open up, I just said we'll
Okay.
take comments, so.
Well, I'd be very happy to make a motion to approve an ordinance adopting zone change Z-17-31 to change the zoning designation from RA1 to C1 located.
No, not C1.
To AP.
AP, I'm sorry, AP. To AP located approximately at the corner of Merrill Road and Sandia Drive.
And will you notice those conditions that have been noted, the trail?
Yes, I will.
The gate.
And with that, we'll add the conditions that there'll be a strip along the northern boundary, 10 feet wide, that will be deeded to the city. The city will then put in a trail to allow school children and other pedestrians to walk and then access Riverside Elementary through an existing gate that will be unlocked and locked according to.
I wouldn't even go as
school
far
hours.
as the existing, but to make sure there is a gate back,
Make
because
sure
they
it's
want to
gate.
move that gate around, so.
Okay.
So, all right, we have a motion with those conditions by Councilman Ivy, seconded by Councilman Belliston.
Ivy, aye.
Ranger, aye.
Bellis and I.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. And I would again echo the willingness of the parties to work together there, that I think really benefited the neighborhood and the school kids.
That's once in a while we get to work it through for just everyone.
Yep,
So
correct.
it's nice to be able to do that. Thank you.
Item C, consideration to approve an ordinance amending the Washington City Code, Section 7-6-D Power Board. Power Board Director Rick Hansen.
Thank you, council. I think a lot of these amendments were in the works before I took this position, so I'll just highlight. You should have the red line. Actually, I think it kind of came out as a green line.
Yeah, I think we got it.
I'm still working on the Google Docs, but the main changes would be to change the number of board members from 7 to 5, and that's in paragraph D1B. I know there was some concern of having a hard time getting a full council there, or a quorum, excuse me, of 5 members with that large of a group. And so this will simplify that. The other changes are in section D2 to items B, C, and D. And the changes in B are to simplify the language. The regulations and rules were really covered under A. Item C is probably the largest change as far as the duties that the power board would have. This would allow them to, the way I look at it, take some initiative on their own. And if they wanted to research a particular topic, they could bring that before the power board, and then in front of the director, city manager, and you as the council as well. So it'd make them maybe a little more proactive in
So
that.
So B, regulations and rules, what you're saying is a restatement of operations and policies.
Correct.
In A.
Is
And
that what
then
they
on
call-
C, you're essentially replacing C.
Exactly.
With
The
that
original,
they can proactively rather than,
if you want to say reactively, or
right, okay.
you can be on the, take a, if they choose to do that. And then on D, it was just kind of wordy to say the mayor and city council twice, and so that just simplified the language on D. And then the only other change is on,
And I appreciate that it says regularly as well as upon request
Yeah.
rather than just
Right.
request. So that's good. So we know we're going to hear from you. And
right.
that's good.
And then the last change is on D8, just defining a quorum as 3 members instead of 5 to correlate with the number of member change. Any
Okay,
other
so I
questions?
take it you've had some problems with getting adequate attendance to.
That's
conduct
my
business.
understanding. Again, to be honest, since I've been in this position, we've only had 2 meetings. I know the first one, we were late about 15 minutes until we got the 5th member there. And it sounded like there was some problems previously just because of the sheer volume required there. And I don't know if Jeff has any insight on that any more than I do.
Say Councilman Nyson may have anything, because he's been
That's
our
true. He's
council
been on there a lot
member.
longer than I have.
My feelings is it's good to streamline it.
The council representative is not part of the board itself.
No.
Correct,
Separate
correct.
position. Right.
That's it.
In a lot of other boards, isn't the council representative part of it?
Well, you know what, these power boards are,
Well,
they really vary a lot among the state. And so you can, if you'd like to have them be a voting member, you certainly can.
no,
It's your
this is just
discretion.
my curiosity, because sometimes the council position becomes a voting member.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of ones I've seen, and not everybody does them, but the ones I'm thinking of recently, I don't know if they vote or not, because I mean, I've seen the mayors on that power board before too, and they participate. Some mayors participate about 90% of the discussion, but still don't vote.
I think the appropriate voting place is here.
Correct.
With the council and council.
Yeah, because it's a recommending body, and that's just a recommending body anyway.
And
I'm
so
not
it's
sure
like
what
a
it
double
changes.
recommendation, and I think that dialogue with council members is more appropriate here. Sure.
The difference is it makes that, sometimes it might make the quorum, meeting that quorum easier, or sometimes maybe it'll make it harder to meet the quorum. That's the nice thing about it is, if they don't come, it doesn't go against having your 3 members there.
Well, I think it's good how it is.
And this has been reviewed by Roger Carter as well as Roger Bundy, who's the chairman of that
group. Okay. Any other discussion from the council?
No, I just appreciate you make the adjustments that are necessary for us to have it function the way we've
Trying to do our best.
needed to function. So
I'll look for a motion then.
I'll make the motion on this one, I guess. I'll make the motion that we approve the ordinance amending the Washington City Code 76-D. That includes all the changes that have been outlined.
Motion for approval by Councilman Nyson,
I'll second that.
second by Councilman Ivy.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ellis and I.
Nice night.
Turek, aye.
Thank you very much, council.
Item D, continuation to consider 8, the approval of an ordinance amending the Washington City zoning ordinance pertaining to restricting, regulating, licensing, and land use permitting of the retail sales of e-cigarettes and related products in Washington City, including prohibiting the establishment of retail tobacco specialty businesses in Washington City. This is something that we've worked on for quite a while, and glad to see that it's back ready for final. Council Starkey, you want to lead us?
Yeah, so this is, and just to bring it back and just to give a reminder of it, and some of the language is just because of your direction at following our last public meeting, which was, so after the Planning Commission public meeting and discussion, and then after the public hearing and discussion by the City Council at the previous meeting, which it went for hours and hours, was really, I think, really detailed and involved those involved in the business who currently had businesses operating under that, and those of the public. So we had community participants and Southwest Health participated. So it was really, I think you guys really talked it through and came up with some ideas, I think, that are going to be different, I think, than any I've seen so far, and in particular in our area. And the two things that you wanted clarified on the current ordinance were the following, and there was some concern raised about two factors, and that was those who currently have the right to, or have the actual licenses for these retail tobacco specialty businesses. So a lot of folks think of the vape shops. The concern from that group was that maybe a pretext that either one, expanding their business in any way would result in automatic revocation of their right to be able to operate that business, because it may simply be that their business is good and they expanded in the normal course of business. That's what they were doing in the same location, however, or that the party would, in effect, not be able to sell their business. And we have, folks that have lived their whole practically their whole lives with Council Nyson in the business community here in Washington, and family businesses and small businesses who had their own good insights into it about whether or not the mere selling of a business means that, and based upon the fact that there will be no issuance of retail tobacco specialty stores in the future, that somehow undermined the principles of just,
I think these were two issues that were concerns, but the bigger issue was that if there was an infraction by an employee, that their license would be pulled. So how was that addressed?
Well, and let's don't forget that what this license does. This license isn't just for, we think of it as being for just the retail tobacco specialty stores, but this is for every other license also. So this is a provision for the licenses, which are almost all of the tobacco store licenses we have in our city and in every city in the state of Utah. And that's those based upon that are issued as a secondary license to the primary business, your Walmart, your convenience store,
Hey, but if somebody screws up in Walmart, they don't yank Walmart's.
But the same provision applies. All of these provisions apply to each of them. So they all apply to each of them.
That's not what we were reading in the ordinance, and I don't have the full ordinance.
Well, yeah, but
in front of me.
Well, that's what it states already. So so what it reads is, in addition, that the tobacco business license, well, this is frankly under state law anyway, whether we put it in our ordinance or not, this is state law. You can have that revoked for any of the issues we've talked about. So engages that the licensee, owner, or operator engages in a pattern of unlawful activity as outlined in Utah Code 7610-1601. That's what I went back and just confirmed that this is applying across the board. It's already based on state law anyway.
So I guess it kind of goes back to the same thing, though. I don't have the ordinance in front of me.
I think the recommendation from the council was we wanted that stricken out of there. If state law handles it, that's the state law portion of it, that this group kind of wanted that dismissed.
Like I said, I don't have the full ordinance in front of me to read it. I know it was something that we discussed heavily before, and short of having the ordinance and in front of me, I'm not prepared to take a vote
Yeah,
on it.
as I understood it, that was exactly what it was. We wanted that portion of it stricken out. And we also wanted the portion of it changed that they could sell the business.
Right.
As long as it stayed in the same location. And that they could expand it as long as it stayed in the same location. That was
Right.
really the three concerns that we had.
Yes.
The ordinance stood other than that.
And so for the first one, and again, as I read it and realized it applies across the board currently, it already applies. The unlawful
but-
activities, we can mild it down or take it out completely. I mean, that's, the reality is whether it's in or not.
I
we
don't
have that
want it
right.
in our ordinance.
Yeah, I think we did. I think that was the
So,
No, and that's,
direction of the council.
and what I
was to
think we
do
can
that.
do it from that standpoint. Be aware though, that doesn't change the fact that by state law.
Yeah, the state law is
We realize
fine.
that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
but
And that's fine, because I think that's gonna apply, state law will apply anyway.
Correct.
So I don't mind that. The more really original idea in terms of the other two provision, that's his original idea, because I've seen nobody else in the state that's gone to this extent to make sure that this can be done. So we're writing into it that that the expansion provision is clearly not going to be automatic. Expansion, you simply need to comply with what any other business would have to comply with
Sure.
in terms of the expansion.
Sure.
and it's fine, but this kind of, the discussion that we're having right now, basically, we're being asked to vote on a staff summary report of an ordinance without having the ordinance in front of us, for the same reason that I objected to the
No, and that's
chief's
and that's
not
absolutely fine
not
from
having
that
the right ordinance.
standpoint.
I'd rather table it tonight.
Well, and that's fine from that standpoint. The removing of the other ones is, I just want to make sure that, I don't want anybody to be misled into thinking that somehow that means they can't be revoked for that. Simply because we don't have it within our
I mean, you
ordinance.
can certainly quote or reference in the ordinance, the law that does apply, and indicate that they're expected, of course, to apply with that.
Yeah.
You can reference it. We just don't need to make it separate, different, and more difficult.
And I think it's fine to do that. It says the same thing in effect by referencing it.
Sure.
But what we've done on the other side is specifically provided for the fact that they have the ability to be able to sell their business, although whoever buys the business still has to come in and get a separate license.
No, I'm fine
Yeah,
with
okay.
the two additions or changes that are part of the staff report here. But until I have the full context of the ordinance complete, or until that issue's cleared up, I'm not prepared to vote.
Well, that's fine, because I can tell you right now, the other isn't taken out, because when I went back in and realized it's already across the board by state law, period, because we don't have a specific one for our
And that's,
secondary
and that's
licenses
fine.
anyway.
I'm not gonna mess with state law, but I care about what Washington ordinance says.
Because that'll have to be done, because I would clearly still have to do that.
Okay.
Well, then we're not quite ready.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll make a motion that we table item 12D.
A motion for tabling of 12D
I'll second that.
by Councilman Belliston, seconded by Councilman Ivy.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ellison, aye.
Nice and I.
Turek, aye. 12E, continuation of consideration to approve an ordinance adopting the Washington City Culinary Water Master Plan and Impact Fee Facilities Plan. Public Works Director Mike Shaw. This is one that we discussed at our last
Work session.
our work session,
And
and then was tabled till this meeting to give the council a chance to digest a few more things and take a little more time to look at it. So with that, council, if we have any concerns or questions that we need to address Mike with.
Kind of looking for the presentation first if we can.
We had the presentation once.
I think you had.
We've had it twice, actually.
Yeah.
We weren't planning on doing the presentation again. So actually didn't bring it with us.
I think maybe the questions of just showing what the differences are in the fee structure.
So that would be in the next item.
Okay.
So the next item is the resolution.
Yeah, this is just adopting the plan.
The plan and
This
the
is
plan and the
portion of it.
Yeah, okay.
So if there's no more discussion about the plan, we'll look for a motion.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll make that motion to approve an ordinance adopting the Washington City Culinary Water Master Plan and Impact Fee Facilities Plan.
Second.
Motion for approval by Councilman Ivy, seconded by Councilman Belliston.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Belliston, aye.
Nice night.
Turek, aye.
That is that a 15-year plan, a 10-year plan?
It's a 5-year.
It's a 10-year plan horizon, but we revisit it every 5 years. So the last plan was 2010, so it actually went a little longer than 5 years. But it went longer because we took quite a while to get our wastewater master plan done and wanted to finish that prior to doing this one. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, item 12F, continuation of the consideration to approve a resolution adopting the culinary water user fee.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. From the work session and the regular meeting, from what I got was that Council wanted to see the fee based on more of the commercial side of the meters. And that was my mistake. I actually, we have been billing that for years and I just didn't include that in the resolution. So your new resolution actually has the new calculations based on the fees that we have had in the past. So as you go up in meter sizes, you get more gallonage for each of those tier grades. So an example in your basic 5/8 and 3/4 meters, which are your standard residential meters, your base rate starts at $1.20 a thousand, and that's 0 to 5,000 gallons. As you move up the scale to a 1-inch meter, it's 0 to 9,000 gallons. 1.5 inches is 0 to 20,000 gallons, and it just graduates on up there. So you're getting a lot more water for each of those tiers in the rate.
The larger the meter, the more water.
The more water you get at that
lower
rate.
tier before you tier up.
Correct. And then I just wanted to hit quickly with this new rate. Our average rate right now in the old fee is $33.95 per month, and the new rate, the average monthly bill will be approximately $35.99 per month. So about a $2.04 per month increase for the average resident.
And the reason for that is based on the
capital facilities plan, the projected improvements that we need to do to our facilities. And the fees are based solely on our current or our existing customers. A few years back, we had to go through the old part of town and we replaced all of the old system to bring them up to standards. We were having water leaks 3-4 times a week in this old system. That's what this user fee goes to cover, is those costs and those. There's no impacts for new growth that is covered out of this fee. That's all covered under the impact fee calculation.
And I think it's talking to you, you kind of indicated that to some degree the base fee compensated for that. Can you talk?
Yeah, and our base fee actually went down, not greatly, but our base fee went from $18.25, which is currently in the new rate, we're $18.17. So about an 8 cents deduction in the base rate, but in the usage rate, it'd be an increase of 10 cents per thousand on the first tier. And then just a real quick, the base rate, that covers our fixed cost, things that we have to provide regardless whether you use any water. We have to provide fire flows. We have to maintain our systems, whether you use any water or not. And that's why we have a separate base fee and from the user fee.
Any other questions from council? Discussion?
I Mayor Pro Tem, I'll make a motion that we approve a resolution adopting the culinary water user fee.
Motion for approval by Councilman Belliston,
I'll second it.
second by Councilman Nyson.
Ivy, aye.
Ranger, aye.
Belliston, aye.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. Thank you. 12:13. Report of officers from assigned committees.
I don't have a report. I just,
Sorry.
Should we give you a minute? We can come back because
I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to serve. It's truly been a privilege. I'm a better man for being here. I thank you.
Any other?
Well, I better make a statement. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve the last 4 years, and I really enjoyed getting to know the elected officials and all the staff and the workers of the city, and I've got a good relationship with a lot of the public, and it's been a great experience, and it's one that I'm sure that if I ever wrote a book, I would put it as one of the highlights of my life. So thanks, everybody.
We'll look forward to that book, Councilman. No, I too wanted to express my appreciation to both of you great men for the service you've given our community. You've certainly left your mark on our community very positively, and it's taken time away from your personal lives. And anybody that serves up here knows the time commitment that comes to that. And so we certainly appreciate your willingness, all that you've done for our community, and at least for me personally and my family. I want to say thank you very much. So the mayor also, last night as we spoke, asked me to share his gratitude and thanks from him as the mayor, from his family, and the citizens at large. Also, thank you. We certainly appreciate your service and all that you've done for our community. It's been a great dedication there.
I had planned on jumping out in front and saying thanks to these two. I've truly enjoyed the friendships that I made with both of them. Kurt beat me to the punch, but it's really been a pleasure to get to know both of you and to serve with both of you. And I hope that just because you're not going to be on the council next year doesn't mean that you're not involved with us. So I appreciate it.
Been an education for me too, to watch council pull together and be respectful, learn from each other. And we don't always agree on our votes, and it never matters. It's never personal, and it's always productive. And I enjoy the dialogue that brings us together when we are working on some really heavy projects, and you've contributed to that quickly in your appointment, and you've done that over lots of years, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you for enriching my life and my education.
Thank you, Councilman. We look forward to our two new council members joining us and joining in and having a great next few years. So with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Belliston, second by Councilman Ivy.
Ranger, aye.
Belliston, aye.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. We'll see you all in next year.